A dark-haired boy stood near the mansion. He folded his hands and began to light a fire. As soon as the flame lit in the boy's hands, he put his hands forward and cast a fireball spell. The boy released a huge fireball from his hands, which flew forward and hit the target center exactly. When he took out a flask of water, an elderly woman approached him and praised him for his excellent work. She was surprised that at such a young age he became the first genius in the fellow's family, so good at magic. The guy turns to the older woman and looks at her in surprise. Then he becomes embarrassed and says that the woman is exaggerating. The older woman sighs and asks what that means. The old woman says that the guy has amazing strength and precision of magic, and he hasn't even received the gift yet. The boy thinks about the words about the gift. At the age of 15, each person receives a special ability from the goddess. Of the many different types of gifts, the most highly valued are the combat gifts. Suddenly, a bright flash occurs behind the guy. A stream of energy hits the ground. A silhouette of a man appears in this stream. The boy and the old woman cover themselves with their hands as a strong wind and dust rises. The boy takes his hand away and realizes that it is lightning magic. Right behind the boy's back, his older brother appears, unable to understand where he ended up. The boy turns around and recognizes Keith. The boy approaches his younger brother and addresses him by his name, Alma. He asks if his brother is still training. An elderly woman approaches Keith and calls him the most famous genius of the Fellows family since its founding. She says that his gift as a lightning mage has not gone unnoticed. She says that even the guards call him outstanding. Alma walks up to Keith and, pressing her hand to her chest, says that she is actually very proud of him. He says that Keith uses his gift at a very high level. Keith looks at Alma with displeasure. The guy asks if there's anything he can do to help Keith so he can talk to him on the way. Keith rubs the back of his head and wants to say something. He says his father took some time to talk to Alma. Alma's eyes widen in surprise. Alma went into the house. There he was met by a servant who told the boy to sit down at the table where his father was already waiting for him. Alma walked into the dining room and sat down at a table with a huge amount of different food on it, and at the other end of the table sat his father, who was already eating. The man says that in just one day, Alma will receive her gift. The guy confirms his words and continues eating. The man twirls a glass of wine in his hands and looks at it thoughtfully. He chuckles. And then he says that he tried to invite Kureha and Kita to the ceremony, but they can't come. Alma doesn't blame them, since they are always busy. Alma is honest about the fact that he still feels unprepared to receive the gift. He doesn't know if he can receive a useful gift for the fellow's family. The man wipes his mouth with a napkin and says he will say what he thinks. He hopes that Alma will be the one to inherit his sage. Alma blushed deeply with excitement. The boy knew that gifts were passed down through generations. In his family, his father has the gift of sage, and his mother has the gift of magician. In such families, children are more likely to receive the gift of wizard. In reality, the eldest son, Kureha, received the gift of fire mage, and the second son, Keith, lightning mage. Each of them was given a gift that specialized in elemental magic, and they both became wizards. But their gifts were superior to the gift of the sage. The sage has great magical talent and can instantly use various spells, undoubtedly the most powerful gift among wizards. The boy remembered that his father had earned a number of achievements and promoted from baron to count in one generation. Alma thinks that if 2 generations of the family had the gift of sage, the family would be very strong. The man says that he has high hopes for Alma. He says that he has been watching the boy since childhood, so he is sure that the boy will be useful to the fellow's family no matter what gift he received. Alma looks at her father in surprise. The man says that, fortunately, he was able to free up some time in his schedule, so he will be able to attend the ceremony. Alma blushed and began to cry. He had to wipe his tears with his hand. At that moment, he thought about how happy he was. Alma returned to his room and began to change his clothes. After changing, he went to the building where the ceremony would take place. On his way to the ceremony, Alma thought that even if he did not receive the gift of the sage, no matter how bad his gift was, he would still do his best. The boy came to a huge hall, where a huge number of hooded people stood before him. Right in front of him stood an elderly man in a cloak and with a staff in his hands. He announced that the announcement of Alma Fellows' gift would soon take place. The boy decided to do everything possible to be rewarded for his gift. He also does this for his father and the Fellows family. The old man starts talking about the gift. The boy closes his eyes and blushes. The man cannot name the gift. The boy still waits, closing his eyes. The old man suddenly opens his eyes wide and looks at Alma in bewilderment. He wonders what this means. Alma looks at the man in surprise. Everyone in the room starts whispering. Alma's father asks why the gift is taking so long to be announced. He turns to the priest and asks what gift Alma has. The priest answers that the boy has no gift. The man looks at his son, dumbfounded. He asks what all this means. The boy once again plays in his head the information that he does not have a gift. He opens his eyes wide and asks how this could happen. Everyone watching the ceremony began to discuss how it was unheard of for a person not to have the gift. Everyone wondered how in the fellow's family, the youngest son of a sage could not have the gift. Alma was still looking at the priest, dumbfounded. He was trying to understand what was happening. He was having trouble breathing. He heard people talking negatively about him. Alma's father approaches the priest and asks what this means. He says it is a mistake. He is convinced that everyone without exception receives the gift. The priest tries to calm Alma's father down. He tries to explain that such precedents have never happened before. He proves that he is not lying. Alma doesn't want to let her father down. He thinks again that he needs to try harder. He remembers his father's words about his hopes of inheriting his gift of sage first. Alma understands that in order to live up to expectations, now that he does not have the gift, he must try even harder. The boy tries to call his father, while remembering his words, convincing him that his son would be useful to the fellow's family, no matter what gift he received. The man turns around and asks how Alma can shamelessly call him father. The guy looks at his father in shock. The man asks if the boy really doesn't understand the situation he's in. Alma tries to say that even without the gift, he can be useful. The man swings his hand and sends out a magical attack that silences his son. An attack occurs right in front of Alma, leaving a mark on the ground near his feet. The man says the difference between not having a gift and having one is huge. He asks if the boy really can't hear the voices in the room that say it's a lineage issue. The man says that Alma has blackened the name of the fellow's family house. This is a disgrace to their house. In the background, voices are heard saying that Alma is just a rich boy. The man holds his hand out and says he has no need for someone so incompetent that he couldn't receive the fellow's family's gift. The man expels Alma from the fellow's family. After the ceremony, the guy heads to the nearest tavern and orders himself an alcoholic drink. He empties mug after mug while behind his back. Everyone is discussing how the fellow's boy failed to receive the gift. Alma noticed that the rumors spread very quickly, and then he ordered a new mug of the drink, which cost him 700 gold coins. The amount Alma received from the fellow's family was 50,000 gold coins. It was a dangerous amount for a man abandoned by everyone and with no knowledge of the world. Alma gets up from her seat and decides that this is not the situation where she needs to solve her problem with alcohol. The patrons at the next table turned and looked at the guy. Alma wondered how he was going to live. He was about to leave the tavern, but a customer sitting at the next table tripped him and he fell. The visitors laughed. And Alma tried to get up, but he couldn't, and he just lay back down, only on his back. He understood that now he was alone. No one else in this world will help him. Alma cried while thinking that without the gift or home, no one would notice him. He didn't believe that things could get any worse. The boy became curious because he had just noticed something unusual. He laughed and wondered if all this that was happening could be his gift. Suddenly, the guy hears a voice that tells him that his Reincarnator gift has been activated. His eyes widened in surprise. Alma started to get up from the floor and felt his head. He tried to understand what the voice he just heard was. He hears the voice again, which tells him that memories and skills from a past life are inherited. The boy tried to understand what was happening. Suddenly, he felt a terrible pain, which made him clench his teeth. At that moment, a voice informed him that he had inherited the status. All the customers started laughing. They noticed that the guy's face was distorted by pain. They asked him what he was doing. The customers who tripped him were sure that the guy was just exaggerating the pain of the fall. The boy rose from the floor and began to shout loudly. At that moment, a voice informed him that he had successfully inherited attack magic, support magic, defense magic, recovery magic, space magic, spirit magic, special magic. The boy began to cry in pain when he heard that he had successfully inherited elemental magic, space-time magic, forbidden magic. Then Alma fell to his knees and hung his arms. He sighed. At that moment, he realized why he had not received the gift during the ceremony. Alma looked at his hands. He came to the point that he had a gift from the very beginning. His whole body was enveloped in a strong aura. Suddenly, the guy was called out, asking what he was up to. Alma was scared at first, and then turned around and saw a man in armor, who asked who Alma was. Alma asks what happened. The man points his hand at the tavern and asks if the guy is to blame for what happened to the tavern patrons. Alma looks around and notices that all the patrons were unconscious. The boy realized that it was magical energy. People who had no resistance were affected by the large wave of magic released when the Reincarnator was inherited. The man got into a fighting stance and asked Alma what he was doing. He asked again who Alma was. He thinks Alma is another bandit. And then he wonders how the guy had the strength to deal with all the customers. Alma tries to explain to the man that he misunderstood him, but the man interrupts and is about to attack. He claims that it is useless to talk to the guy. The guy dodges the blow. Alma closes his eyes and thinks that the Reincarnator is a gift he received in his first life. He knew that the Reincarnator allows one to be reborn only once. Skills and memory return at the age of 15. The guy puts his hand forward and starts using magic. He casts the spell of darkness, void. A black portal appears, from which skeletons emerge. The man gets scared and loses the power of speech. Alma at this point remembers that his first life was used to accumulate power. He bet on his second life and received all types of magic. The man was overwhelmed by the skeletons from the portal and eventually lost consciousness. At that moment, Alma stood in the middle of the tavern and looked at his hand, realizing that his second life had begun. The knights questioned the patrons of the tavern where the battle took place. One of the patrons mentions that there was a boy from the fellow's family in the tavern. One of the knights tells about how all the patrons of the tavern lost consciousness last night. The second knight asks what happened. The knight tells him that he himself does not know the details. One of the knights notices an alley and asks if Alma might be hiding there. The second knight says there is no point in looking for the guy there. His interlocutor replies that this is not true at all. He convinces the knight that if they can catch Alma, they will be paid a reward. The knights still decide to explore the alley, but do not notice anyone. Alma at this moment used his magical abilities to stand on the wall, so that he would not be noticed by the knights who were below. Alma realizes that the incident in the tavern has already been noticed. He walks along the wall and moves to the roof. Alma decides that remaining in the Empire as an exile is not the best option, but he doesn't know where he can go. Alma remembers that to the west of the Empire is the kingdom of Fenrir. It was a great power, not inferior to the Empire of Aristocratic, and has existed for more than 200 years. If Alma remembers everything correctly, then his secret refuge from his past life should be there. He does not know if it survived, since all this happened more than 200 years ago. Alma was eager to find out how the world had changed during all this time. Alma understands that on the roads one can meet carts trading with the West. He decides to go down. The guy walks further down the street and notices that the street is almost deserted, as it was only morning. Suddenly, the boy notices a familiar silhouette in front of him and stops. Keith is standing right in front of him. He greets the boy and says that he has been waiting for him for a long time. Alma starts to worry. Keith smiles and asks why the boy started the fight in the tavern. He thinks that being banished for slandering the name of the house has taught him nothing at all. Keith smiles madly and says that their father is furious. Alma asks her older brother to wait. He tries to convince him that there was a misunderstanding. He says that everything that happened in the bar was a big accident. Alma convinces the guy that no matter what happens to the family, he does not want to fight with his older brother, so he leaves the Empire. Keith clenches his jaw in anger. He says nothing changes. Alma doesn't understand what his older brother is talking about. Keith says he doesn't care what happened at the bar, he just wants to deal with his little brother. Alma's eyes widen in surprise. Keith puts his hands forward and starts using his magic. He says that he has been mean to Alma all his life. Alma tried to understand what it all meant. Keith was releasing a powerful stream of magical energy and wishing the worst on his brother. Alma realizes that Keith is attacking him with ball lightning, a basic thunder magic spell that varies in power depending on the user. Alma's older brother is a high wizard, so this is not something to be underestimated. A strong explosion occurs. People who were nearby covered themselves with their hands to protect themselves from the dust and the power of the explosion. Keith watched, smiling, as the boy took a hard hit, but then a hand appeared from the haze. Keith's eyes widened in surprise. He sees that Alma had placed a stone slab in front of him, preventing Keith's attack from hitting him. Alma used earth magic, the spell Stone Shield. Keith asked his brother if he could really use earth magic. Alma said he had been practicing in secret. Alma knew that earth magic was useful against thunder magic, as unexpected as it might be. Keith's jaw tightens in anger. He says the guy has always been like this, and then he admits that he's tired of it all. Alma looks at him questioningly. Keith clasps his hands and says that his little brother's progress was always so much better. He was tired of being compared to someone else. Alma tried to call out to his older brother, but he wouldn't listen. Keith goes on to say that this is why, when he found out that Alma had not received the gift, he felt such incredible relief. Keith began to laugh out loud. Alma just looked at him. Keith raised his hand and started talking about how he didn't like the fact that a person like Alma was born in his house. He concentrates all his magical power in his hand and says that it is in this place that he will defeat Alma. Alma looks at the boy in horror as she understands what spell he will use. He screams that there are people in the area who could be affected by the magical attack. He thinks that none of the passers-by have anything to do with him. Keith uses thunder magic, the spell Elegant. Alma sees a spear of lightning. He wonders if his older brother is really going to break through the earthen shield. Alma understands that if a ricochet hits an ordinary person without resistance, he will at least receive serious injuries. Keith furiously screams for Alma to turn into coal and sends a magical attack straight towards him. Alma's eyes widen in surprise. At this time, Keith happily watches as a powerful explosion occurs. Keith laughs. He sees the huge mark his attack left. He sighs and then opens his mouth in surprise as he doesn't see Alma. The boy wondered where his little brother had run off to. While Keith was clenching his hand in anger, Alma was standing on the building and watching his older brother. Alma was able to create a shield and protect all the passers-by from Keith's attack. All the passers-by wondered how they ended up inside the shield. Alma used space magic, the spell Teleport. Without pronouncing the spell out loud, everything happened almost unnoticed, but the guy spent a lot of mana. Alma expected that carrying so many people without a spell would tire him out greatly. Alma is amazed by his older brother's strength, but he does not support his older brother involving strangers in such things. Alma apologizes to her older brother for having to deal with him and knock him out. Keith was very angry. He raised his hands and started using his magic power, asking where Alma ran off to. Alma looked at his brother and realized that his lightning magic was indeed very strong, but he had one weakness. Alma threw a small stone at his brother. It hit him right in the head and then bounced off. Alma shouted for his older brother to notice. Keith turned around and became even more angry. He tries to find out from Alma how he managed to survive the attack. Alma says it's not that simple this time. Keith laughs and says the guy could have attacked him by surprise, but instead he revealed himself. Alma says he just wanted to answer his question. Alma says he doesn't need such tricks to deal with his older brother. Keith asks what the boy means by that. Alma forms her hands into seals and uses earth magic. The boy decides to use the spell Stone Prison. Keith notices that stone barriers are starting to appear everywhere. He yells at Alma that the boy should not look down on him. Then Alma folded his hands again and used lightning magic. He managed to create a stone castle. Keith is angry that Alma was able to master even lightning magic. The guy asks if Keith noticed one important detail. Alma says that the earth has been further magnetized by his older brother's magic. This will strengthen his attack. Keith cursed as he could not escape from the stone prison. Alma decided to help the passers-by who were almost attacked by Keith. He helped an elderly woman get back on her feet. All the passers-by began to thank the guy for saving them all. Alma says that he should apologize to him instead. He tried to explain what really happened but was interrupted. Passers-by asked the guy not to be modest and say that he was able to save them. At first, the guy looked at all the passers-by in surprise. Then he smiled and thanked them all. Keith turned to Alma and asked when he was able to learn such complex spells. He is sure that Alma is hiding something. Keith screams about disappointing his father by not inheriting the sage. He decides that the boy wanted to feel sorry for him and not make things worse. He demands that Alma answer him. Alma remembers how Keith taught him lightning magic. He told his brother that it was quite useful and universal magic, with which you can not only attack, but also, for example, attract objects. Alma always respected his older brother. He dreamed of getting closer to him someday. Alma turns to her brother and asks him not to look for him. He says he is leaving the Empire and going further east, but in reality, he is going west. Alma smiles and says that he doesn't want to have to deal with Keith's strong and amazing lightning magic again. Keith looks at him dumbfounded. Keith then smiles madly, thinking that Alma will actually head east. He says the boy isn't very smart. He asks if Alma really thinks his older brother will just leave him alone after something like that. Keith yells that he's going to stalk his little brother on a permanent basis. Alma turns around and says goodbye to her brother. Alma leaves. Everyone is amazed that the guy just up and left. The girl in the hood was watching everything. The boy walked around the city and found a cart that could take him west. The driver showed the boy where he could sit. Alma sat inside the cart. Alma shook his head and thought about how it was his first time in a cart and so far away. A blonde girl gets into the carriage. The guy immediately recognizes her. He remembers that the girl was in the square. The guy's gaze shifts sharply when the girl looks at him. He wondered why the girl was looking at him. A man enters the cart and says that he needs to conduct an inspection. Knights approach the carriage and say that they saw a dangerous magician nearby. The knight says that they need to check all the passengers. Alma looks out and notices the knights. One of them turns to the guy and asks if the passengers have documents. One of the passengers shows the documents and states his last name. Alma tensed up as the knights checked the documents. He thought about maybe teleporting. The knight turned to Alma and asked if the boy would show his documents. The boy was scared. Suddenly, a girl appeared right in front of the boy and said that Alma was her brother. The girl looked at the knight. The girl says her name is Luna. She says she came from the Western Flemish territories. She shows documents and says that Alma is her brother. The knight then turns his attention to the other passengers and begins to question them. Luna returns to her place and sighs. At this point, Alma looks at the girl and wonders why she helped him. He assumes that the girl is thanking him for saving her in the square. But there may be another reason. The knights say that all passengers have been checked and allow the carriage to move on. The carriage starts moving. Alma turns to the girl and thanks her for helping him with the knights. He says that she saved him. Alma extends his hand to the girl and says his name. He mentions that he saw the girl in the square. He says that he is glad to meet the girl. Luna extends her hand and shakes it back. Alma sighs in relief, and the girl just watches him for a moment. She remembers the boy's fight with Keith. Luna suddenly starts talking about teleportation. The guy turns around and notices that the girl is saying something very quietly. She was talking about how spatial magic is very difficult. Not everyone can master it. The girl thought about something and then turned to Alma. The guy immediately looked at her with a question. Luna turned to the guy and asked him to do something for her. The guy looked at the girl seriously. Alma continued to look at the girl as she tried to make her request. She folded her hands on her knees, raised her head, and asked if the boy could go to her homeland with her. Alma asks why she wants to go to her homeland with him. The girl says that there is work that she can trust only to him. Alma thinks for a moment and then says that he understands everything. He assumes that the girl helped him so that he would go with her to his homeland. Luna looks at the guy and asks what this means. She starts waving her arms from side to side and says that the guy misunderstood her. She doesn't imply that the guy is obliged to do this. Luna blushes and hangs her head. She says she just wanted to help Alma. The guy looks at the girl in surprise. A second later, Alma starts laughing. The girl asked why Alma suddenly started laughing. The guy apologized. Alma was not against helping Luna, but he was being followed at the moment, so accompanying him could create a lot of problems. Luna closes her eyes and says that she understands that her request is unexpected. She says that if the guy has some business, he should do it first. Alma is silent for a while and then thinks about business. Alma feels like he trained hard in his past life and mastered powerful magic to be happy in his present life. He wonders if he should do it by force. Alma raises his head and looks at the girl. He asks what happiness means to the girl. Luna wonders why the guy asks her such questions. Alma says that he is just interested in the girl's opinion on this matter. Luna turns away and thinks for a moment. She remembers her parents and blushes. Then she tells the guy that for her, happiness is family. The guy asks, why family? Luna says that she cares about the people of her homeland. It is very important to her that her family and friends are happy, that they laugh and enjoy life. She says that this is what makes her happy. Alma looks at the girl in surprise. Luna tilts her head and asks if that's an answer he'll accept. Alma sums it up. He says that the girl is happy when others are happy. He thinks that's quite noble. The girl looks at the guy, waiting for what else he'll say to her. Luna asks if Alma really fought his older brother. The boy looks up and looks at the girl questioningly. She says that she was in the square and heard part of the conversation with Keith. Luna doesn't know everything, but she thought she heard her brother say something about being kicked out of the house. She asks if his own family really kicked him out. The boy chuckles. Luna assumes that the purpose of Alma's trip is revenge. The guy is silent for a while. He folds his arms and says that he is very upset because everyone has abandoned him, depriving him of everything, even his own home. The guy says that there is something more important than all this. He says that his home is the place where he was born and raised. There are people there that he has known since childhood. That is why he has no desire to cause pain. Luna asks why the boy is so kind. Alma says that he considers himself a coward because he lacks courage. Alma apologizes to Luna and says that he needs time to think about her offer. He asks if the girl can wait the night. Luna agrees and says that he can give an answer the next day. Alma decides that he will definitely answer the girl. He thanks Luna again for everything she has done for him. At this time, Kit runs into his father's office. He opens the door abruptly and calls his father, asking where he is. He looks around the office but does not find his father, only the maid, who is standing to the side. The boy was angry because he needed permission to deal with Alma. One of the maids said that her father had ordered Alma to be brought home no matter what it took. The father sat in the library and thought about Alma being able to defeat Keith. The man understood that although Alma had no gift, he was talented enough to defeat a high-level mage. He believes that this would restore their reputation. The maid told Keith how it all happened. She said, "That's exactly what Mr. P said." Keith opened his mouth in surprise and clenched his fist. He clenched it so hard that it started bleeding. The guy was very angry. Keith began to swear. He knew that if Alma came back, everything would go back to the way it had been. He assumed that it could even get worse. He recalled Alma's words about the boy going to go east. Keith turns to the maid and asks her to tell his father that Alma is going to go west. The maid obeys the guy and leaves to tell her father. Keith smiled predatorily. He decided that he shouldn't go against his father, as it was quite risky. The boy thought that he was the only one who knew about Alma heading east. The boy threw his coat over himself and smiled, thinking that there was no turning back. He wanted Alma to wait, because the boy was going to make him pay for everything he did to him. Keith walked down the hallway and laughed madly. Ironically, Keith, in an attempt to trick his father, directed him to the right place. The result would be that fellows would follow Alma straight to the west, and Keith would wander aimlessly to the east. At this time, Alma headed to the city of Calistello. The carriage in which the boy was located arrived at the trading city. Alma went into a nearby tavern and paid to spend one night there. The tavern manager points out to the boy that his room is at the end of the corridor. The guy spent 2,000 gold coins and had a little over 1,000 left. He and Luna traveled through the empire and reached a trading city. He had no choice, so he had to stop at a tavern. Alma knew he needed to earn money to continue his journey, but if fellows had sent people after him, he had very little time. Alma wonders if he should go to some dungeon. He suggests that there might be something valuable there, including gold. Suddenly, Alma has the idea that in his past life he might have kept something for himself. The guy put his hand forward and used spatial magic, the spell storage. A cube and a table with an inscription appear right in front of the guy. The guy reads that with the help of such magic, it is possible to create a storage in another dimension. The volume of this storage depends on the magical abilities of the caster. The guy thinks that he worried in vain. In his past life, if necessary, he hid all his things, not thinking that he would need anything in his present life. The guy took out everything that was in the inventory. He saw a lot of skins of different animals and their different body parts, such as eye, tail, fangs. Alma smiled, thinking that this would help him with his financial difficulties. He was going to sell all these things so that he would have enough for his travel expenses. The guy looked at the panel that appeared in front of him and thought about what he should do with the remaining things. He hoped that it would not cause a stir. The boy wondered if there would be real, rare items in his life that he could only get by defeating dragons and other monsters. He assumed that they would be worthless because no one wanted them. Alma decides that it can't get any worse. He plans to go to the guild the next day and ask. The guy thinks about tomorrow and looks out the window, remembering the promise he made to Luna. The girl was sitting on a bed in one of the city's taverns at the time. She was also looking out the window and thinking about tomorrow. The boy entered the guild building. He found the place where the Adventurers Guild of the trading city was located. This place is often used for rest, so the guild is quite crowded. The boy was thinking about where he could sell various magical items. At that moment, right behind him, one of the adventurers brought a boar's head and threw it right on the floor, saying that it was very heavy. Alma turns around and sees the adventurer. He screams. The adventurer apologizes. Alma comes closer and asks if the adventurer is okay. The adventurer smiles and apologizes for interrupting. He said that the boar was too big, which is why the boy didn't notice Alma. Alma thought that the adventurer was his age. He also noticed the cheap equipment. The boy assumed that the adventurer was a newbie who was bringing his first loot. The guy also noticed the blood on the adventurer's face. He assumed that the adventurer had gotten hurt in the fight with the monster. Alma says that it's all his fault. He didn't want the adventurer to accidentally drop the boar's head. The adventurer assures Alma that everything is fine. He says that when monsters lose consciousness, they fall to the ground themselves. The guy introduces himself as an adventurer and says his name is Raul. He assumes that Alma is not from these lands. He asks how he can help the guy. Alma gives his name and says that he was actually looking for a place to sell materials. Raul says that if the guy needs a pawn shop, he can show him where it is. They head towards the pawn shop together. Alma says that he is indeed not from around here. He tells her that he is having financial difficulties, which is why he came to this place. Raul asks if this is really Alma's first time at the guild. He hopes that the boy doesn't plan on becoming an adventurer. Alma is a little surprised that Raul hopes for such a thing. He replies that he didn't come to the guild for that reason. Alma says that if he manages to sell the items, he will go to Familia. Raul finds this interesting. Alma asks if there is anything strange about this. Raul says that everything is fine. Raul says that for such a large guild, there are quite a lot of adventurers in this place. It is because of this that this place has its own hierarchy, which the guy does not like very much. Raul says that's why he asked if Alma wanted to join the guild. He was already planning to start dissuading Alma. Alma looks at the boy and notices a bruise on his shoulder. He wonders in what battle Raul got so many bruises. The boy turns and looks at Alma. Alma clarifies, pointing at the boar. Alma repeats once again that the boar left many bruises on Raul's body. The guy finally understands what is being said and says that the wounds are not actually from the boar. He asks the guy not to worry and chuckles. Alma notices that the administrator has arrived. Both boys turn to the administrator. A girl greets them and asks if the boys want to sell any items. She asks if they have an adventurer registration card. Alma doesn't understand what card they're talking about. The administrator says that pawnshop services are only available to registered guild members. She asks the guys to let her check their documents. Alma didn't want to get involved with the troubled guild, but he had no choice. He was going to get the documents and hand them over for verification, but Raul caught his attention. Raul winked and said he could lend the guy his card. He says the guy could then sell his materials under his name. He doesn't think that the administration remembers all the adventurers by sight. He thinks that the girl won't notice anything. Alma turns to Raul. Alma says that he can be heard because the guy is speaking too loudly. Raul rubs the back of his head and apologizes. He says they should have discussed something like this earlier. The administrator smirks at the guy's inability to lie. The administrator extends her hand and says that there is nothing wrong with that. She explains that it is not prohibited by the rules. She says that since the card owner does not mind, the guys can go through. The girl puts a stamp. Raul says that it's time for them to go into the pawn shop and appraise the items. The three of them walk into the pawn shop. Alma looks up and inspects the weapon hanging right above his head. Alma and Raul then walked over to the gun rack where a man in a bandana was standing. They gave the man the materials to sell. The man says he usually buys boar skin and claws for 5,000 gold. But since they brought him too many this year, he will take only 3,500 gold coins. Raul puts his hands behind his head and says that as long as he has enough, he is happy. The man sighs. He says that Raul always brings boars or small animals. He asks if the boy is tired of it. The man turns to the boy and asks why he doesn't want to go after the big monsters. He adds that the boy seems talented enough. Raul laughs and remembers that one of his friends needs help. The man sighs again. Then he turns his gaze to Alma. He asks why the guy is moving his finger through the air. Alma says that the man should not worry, as the boy will soon get everything he needs from his inventory. Raul and the man are surprised, asking what the boy is going to do. Alma realizes that the others can't see the panel he's using. He then runs his hand over the panel and a cube appears, which Raul and the man look at in surprise. Raul immediately turned to Alma and asked what kind of trick he showed them. The man said it wasn't a trick but a storage facility. This time, a man approaches Alma and cannot believe that at such a young age he has already mastered such a spell. Alma says that this is not such amazing magic. The man asks what he is talking about. The man says that with a spell like this, at the very least, one can build a successful career as a merchant. The boys are silent for a while. Then Raul turns to Alma and says that it's amazing. Alma says that he didn't know that either. He thought that magic was just convenient. Raul turns his gaze to what Alma brought, and his eyes widen in surprise. He asks what the guy brought and then begins to examine it. He notices the tail of a fire dragon, a fang, the belt of a demon general. Alma wonders why the boy has such a reaction. He still thinks that the materials he found in the inventory were very necessary. Alma apologizes and asks if the materials he found will really cost so little. The man and Raul's eyes widen and they ask very loudly why the guy is talking like that. They say that the materials he brought will, on the contrary, cost a huge amount. Alma is tense. The man examines the materials and asks where Alma got them. He says that such materials cannot be bought anywhere. He examines the fang and tells Alma that the fire dragon is of difficulty A. He talks about how low-level adventurers burn within the first minute if they meet one. The man begins to beg, and for credibility, he kneels and bows. The man asks if Alma will allow him to buy the materials. The man assumes that Alma wants to sell these materials where they will be more expensive, so he goes around asking prices in different places. The man asks Alma to sell him materials. He convinces him that this is his only chance. He may never meet another person with the same materials. Alma agrees and says that she will sell all the materials the man needs. The man raises his head and asks if the boy is sure. Alma spreads her arms and confirms her words again. He asks the man to get up from his knees. The man cries and thanks the young man. He promises to pay in full. He asks Alma to wait for a while. Raul approaches Alma and smiles. The man takes out a pencil and starts writing down the materials and the amount he will pay for them. Alma looks at the price list and says that he will be paid 2 million for the materials. Raul opens his mouth in surprise and asks again. He says that this is the first time he has seen such a sum. Alma didn't expect to be paid so much. He thinks that everything left in the vault is worth a fortune. He decides to be careful, as he may be scammed or robbed. The man wipes his face and says that he has never seen such high-quality materials. He mentions the excellent quality again and assumes that the materials are in good condition because they were in the storage. The man waves to the adventurer and Alma, hoping that they will see each other again. Finally, he asks Alma to go to the reception so that they can give him money. Alma notices that the man has started crying again. Alma bows and thanks the man for the generous markup. The man turns away and wipes away tears. He is convinced that he should thank the guy for the materials he provided. Alma and Raul approach the reception. The girl is amazed that the guy needs to be paid 2.5 million. Then Alma and Raul go to a nearby restaurant to eat. They order a huge amount of food. Raul asks if Alma is sure that he deserves a treat. He says that he did nothing for Alma. Alma starts convincing the guy that he couldn't have done it without him. That's why Alma is so grateful to him. He says that if the guy wants, Alma will pay him extra. Raul asks them to communicate without formalities. Alma remembers that the girl at the reception said that it takes time to prepare the money, so she and Raul decided to have lunch. Raul asks how Alma got the materials. He thinks the guy couldn't defeat the monsters on his own. Alma freezes, then wipes his mouth with a handkerchief and thinks about how he should keep the truth about his past life a secret. Alma thinks of something to say. He says that he belongs to a fairly wealthy family, so when he was thrown out of the house, they gave him his things for the last time. Raul looks at the boy worriedly and says that he has been through a lot too. Alma apologizes, thinking that he was too harsh. He says that everything is fine. Alma admits that he is even glad that he left home, because now he can implement many plans. Raul first looks at the guy in bewilderment, and then lowers his head and smirks at the fact that Alma turned out to be a very strong young man. Alma asks if Raul really thinks he is strong. Raul confirms his words, as he believes that optimism and the ability to not give up are also a kind of strength. Raul becomes more serious, and says that he would like to have such power too. He clasps his hands under the table. Alma notices the change in the boy's behavior, and asks if it could be somehow related to Raul's skills. Raul looks up and says that Alma has probably heard from the man at the pawn shop that he only hunts small monsters. Raul looks away and says that when he sees a strong opponent, he feels his body shaking. Raul doesn't believe in winning from the very beginning and sets himself up for losing in advance. He usually looks at his opponents and thinks that they are too strong, so he can't handle them. Such thoughts constantly pop into his head. The guy's body goes numb and he can't move from fear. Alma listens attentively to her interlocutor. Raul rubs the back of his head and chuckles. It seems to him that he won't be able to become a good adventurer. Alma says that Raul thinks of him as strong, even though he is strong enough himself. Raul asks what that means. Alma asks why Raul thinks of himself as inferior. He says that Raul is a good man. Alma convinces him that she has never met anyone who would be so sympathetic and kind to a stranger. Alma raises his index finger. He thinks that this already says a lot. He begins to assure the guy that he has courage and strong leadership qualities. Raul blushes. Alma at this point realizes that she is starting to get very nervous when talking to strangers. Alma also believes that Raul is sensible about his abilities. Thus, he already has qualities that can be developed in the future. Alma notes that adventurers who are too confident in themselves and underestimate their enemies lose. Alma smiles and says that if Raul tries hard, he can definitely become a first-class adventurer. He points his thumb at himself and guarantees this to the boy. Raul blushes even more. He turns to the boy and thanks him for his support. He wipes away a tear and says that he is very pleased to hear such a thing. Raul says that Alma is very wise. He chuckles because he has the feeling that he has talked to a smart grandfather. Alma blushes too. He thinks that the guy is partly right, since he lived to be almost 100 years old in his first life. Suddenly, the bell that hung above the tavern's door rings. Alma and Raul immediately turn their attention to the men who have entered. One of the men asks Raul how he is doing. Raul tensed up and hugged his body with both arms. Alma noticed that the boy was alarmed by the man's appearance. The bell above the door continued to ring as people continued to come into the tavern. They all walked through the tavern and stopped at the table where Alma and Raul were sitting. Raul was very alarmed by the appearance of the man with scars. The man addressed the boy. Alma waited for the man to say something. Raul looked away and greeted the man by his name, Evan. He says that if the man came for the adventurer's contribution, he will only be able to pay at the end of the month. Evan laughs and puts his hand on the table, leaning towards the guy. Raul lowers his head. Evan turns to Alma and asks if he really came to the pawn shop recently. Alma confirms this information. Evan heard that his goods were valued very highly. The man raises his hand and says that their guild has certain rules. He sighs and explains to the boy that everyone must pay the adventurer's fee. Raul starts to get angry. Evan assumes that Alma is a new member of the guild. That's why he tries to convince the guy that he needs to pay the adventurer's contribution. At this point, Raul kicks a chair. Evan looks at him and asks what Raul is doing. Raul smiles and says that Evan was mistaken. He convinces the man that Alma is not an adventurer, but just a client he knows. He says that since Alma is not part of the guild, he does not need to pay. He asks if he said everything correctly. Evan smirks and asks what happened to Raul. He notices that the boy has become bold. He assumes that the change in behavior is due to the fact that he received a lot of money for his help. Alma doesn't hear what Raul and Evan are talking about. Suddenly, someone calls out to Alma. The guy turns around and sees the girl at the reception. She looks at him seriously and asks him to come to her, as she has problems with her documents. Alma agrees and gets up from the table. Raul smiles behind him, and Evan can't understand what's going on. Raul clenches his fist and says that he has some business to attend to, so Alma should go to the reception to see the girl. He pats the guy on the shoulder and says that they will see each other again. Finally, he hands the guy the thing and then goes out with everyone else. Alma looks down at his hand and looks at the thing Raul handed him. He examines the thing and realizes that it is Raul's registration card. He wonders why the guy gave it to him. Alma feels that something is clearly wrong. The men who entered the tavern did not seem friendly to him. Suddenly, the receptionist says that the three who came into the tavern were some of the few who were considered B rank. She adds that they have amazing abilities, but terrible personalities. The girl tells that their gang demands a contribution from all adventurers. Almost every month, adventurers are obliged to pay them money. They have power in this guild, so no one dares to disobey them. Alma asks if the girl called him to ask for help. The girl lowers her head and says that Raul went with Evan and his gang so that Alma could leave the guild in peace. She assumes that Raul gave Alma the registration card so that he could get paid for the materials. The girl takes out a bag of gold coins and places it on the counter. She says that the guy can take his payment. She advises Alma to leave the city as quickly as possible. At this moment, someone's blood splashed in the alley. Raul stood in a fighting stance and breathed heavily. Evan asks if the guy will surrender. The bandits took the guy's wallet and, after examining it, said that he had earned very little. Evan suggests going back to Alma and looking for money from him. He assumes that Alma will have more money. Raul's hands start shaking. He was very scared to continue fighting the bandits. One of the bandits noticed that the guy's hands were shaking. He started laughing. Evan smiles and offers Raul to make a deal with him. The guy asks what kind of deal. Evan says that if the guy tries hard, they will share their profits with him. He promises to provide the guy with a high position in the guild. Evan mentions Alma and asks if the guy really trusts him. He says that Raul will need to bring Alma and they will do the rest themselves. Raul grits his teeth. He grips the sword tighter in his hands, refusing the offer, which makes Evan very angry. The man steps closer to Raul and throws punches. He doesn't have time to block or counterattack yet. Evan tuts and then asks if Raul has decided to be a hero. He mocks him, waiting for a reaction. Raul starts laughing. He raises his head and wants to say something. Evan looks at him angrily. Raul talks about how he just met Alma, but he can definitely tell that the guy is different from all the other adventurers. Raul mentions that even the man from the pawn shop was amazed by Alma's magic. Raul talks about how Alma summoned materials that he had never seen. He says that Alma is completely different because he is from a noble family. He talks about how Alma's abilities are excellent. Raul grips the sword tighter in his hands and says that even with such strength, he was not pretending to be someone and did not sincerely support him. Raul confidently says that he cannot betray him. Raul looks at Evan seriously and says that Alma was the one who truly believed in him. The guy says that even if he is defeated in this alley, he will consider it an honor since he will have a chance to protect Alma. Evan looks at the guy angrily and then hits him really hard. The guy falls to the ground. Evan comes closer to him and says that he is irritated by people with such views. One of Evan's henchmen suggests that they just deal with Raul and not waste time. The second henchman agrees and says that they need to go look for Alma. Evan draws his sword from its sheath and swings it, reminding Raul that he himself wanted to leave the world with honor. Raul lies on the ground and cries. He apologizes to Alma. He thought that was all he could do. Raul thought that the dream of becoming a first-class adventurer would forever remain an unrealizable dream. Raul almost closed his eyes, but before that he saw Alma's silhouette. The guy opened his eyes completely and asked what Alma was doing in this place. Alma stood aside and looked at the bandits with an angry look. Raul got up from the ground and asked what Alma was doing in this place. Alma headed straight towards the bandits. Evan was glad that Alma came himself. Raul tried to get up. He asked Alma to let him run. He calls the bandits the most powerful adventurers in the city and says that they want to take his money. The guy did not want Alma to be involved with the bandits. Evan stepped on Raul and ordered him to be quiet. The boy started coughing and then passed out. He lay on the ground and said nothing more. Evan lifted his leg and walked away from the boy. Alma looked angrily at the bandits. Evan tried to calm him down. He turned to the boy and offered to give him money so as not to enter the battle. He asks if it would be too much for him to spend 2.5 million gold coins alone. The guy mentions that the bandits are called the best adventurers in the city. He raises his head and looks at the bandits with disdain, and then speaks negatively about them. Alma says that the bandits are the type of people who are only used to threatening and fighting. He does not perceive them as rivals. He thinks that they treat those weaker than them terribly. Evan's eyes widen in anger, and he curses. He says he was going to let the guy go if he gave him the money. Now he was really angry about what the guy said. He couldn't let it go. The man then calls his henchmen by their names, Peter and Jake. Peter throws him a potion called Steel Skin, and Jake uses the magic enhancement, Aggressive Force. Evan becomes much stronger. He takes out his weapon and holds it in his hands, smiling predatorily at the boy. He asks if Alma really thought the man could only swing a sword. The man breaks his weapon. He says that his strength is comparable to the strength of a large orc. Also, Evan says that his skin is now so hard that it will be impossible to penetrate. He says that the guy will not have a chance to win. Evan lunges forward to attack Alma. He raises his fist and screams. Alma stares at the man, her expression blank. When the fist gets near his face, he stops it with his hand. He looked very calm. Evan's eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't understand how his fist had been stopped. Alma was squeezing his hand effortlessly in his own. A vein popped out on the man's forehead. Peter and Jake were also shocked by Alma's powers. They thought it was impossible. Jake asked how Alma could stop Evan with one hand. The bandit had become stronger, so it was simply impossible. Alma talks about how in his past life he focused only on magic. He clenches his other hand into a fist and says that his inherited physical abilities are still better than Evan's. The next second, Alma dealt a very strong blow to Evan. Peter and Jake watched the fight in shock. The guy was several times smaller than Evan, but his blow was very powerful. Evan lowered his head and started coughing. At that moment, Alma struck him again. Peter and Jake began to retreat. They were very scared of the guy, as he was striking their leader with powerful blows. They watched in horror as Alma struck Evan. Then, right between them, his body flew and crashed into the wall behind them. Evan's body fell to the ground. The man did not rise from the ground for some time. Peter couldn't believe that Evan was defeated even with their enhancements. Jake wondered why Alma was so strong. Alma was examining his hand at that moment. It hurt when he punched. Evan tried to get up from the ground, but his hands were shaking so badly. He couldn't believe that he had lost to some guy who was much smaller than him, but he wanted to continue the fight. Alma noticed that the man had already started to get up from the ground. He said that Evan was very strong. He thought that one blow from him would make the man lose consciousness. Evan asked Alma why he was so worried about such weak people like Raul. The guy looked at the man in bewilderment and then repeated his question. Evan, Peter, and Jake waited for an answer. Alma wondered why he was so angry. He realized that he and Raul were nothing to each other. This had never happened to him before. Evan yells at his henchmen to deal with Raul if the man gives the signal. Peter walks up and holds the blade to Raul's throat. He is ready to act on the leader's command. Evan laughs at Alma and says that now he won't be able to move a step. He asks if he and Raul are really friends. The man thinks they are quite close. Alma's eyes widen in surprise. He wondered if he and Raul were really friends. He hadn't really thought about it since they had only met recently. Alma remembers that in his past life he was a kind of hermit. And in his present life, although he is the son of a noble family, he did not have a person who could be called a friend. Alma thought Raul was a good person. He is sure that Raul will help a loved one no matter what it takes. People like Raul deserve happiness. At this moment, Alma remembers Luna, who said during the trip that her loved ones from her homeland are dear to her. The boy's eyes widen as he remembers that the girl was happy when her friends and family were doing well, when they were laughing and having fun. The boy finally realizes one very important thing. Alma turns to Evan and asks if he really has some kind of power-up. Evan confirms that Alma is stronger than him. He then points to his head and says that for an adventurer, what's most important is what's in the head. Evan convinces Alma that an adventurer must know how to corner his opponent and how to turn the tide of the game. He laughs and says that's exactly what's happening right now. He's sure the outcome is a foregone conclusion. He asks the guy to stop playing the hero. Alma smiles and starts laughing. Evan looks at the guy seriously and asks why he's laughing. The guy was scaring him. Alma says he just realized something. He starts walking forward. Evan doesn't understand what's going on. He demands the guy stop. The man convinces him that he can order his henchmen to deal with Raul at any time. Alma says that although their views differ, he is sure that there is something that should be clear to everyone. He becomes more serious and says that the outcome of the battle was indeed predetermined. Alma tells him what he did when he first came to this place. Evan doesn't understand what Alma is trying to say. Peter and Jake suddenly fall to the ground, losing consciousness. Evan screamed and asked his minions what had happened to them. Alma used the summoning magic, Nightmare. Dark creatures appeared and jumped on the bandit. Evan saw something terrible and screamed. A few minutes later, Raul regained consciousness. He heard Alma use restoration magic. The boy rose from the ground and grabbed his head. Raul turned his gaze and looked at Evan, who was lying on the ground in surprise. The boy asked what happened. There were some dark creatures right on top of Evan. Alma approaches Raul and explains that he used the summoning magic, Nightmare. Raul immediately turns his gaze to Alma. Alma explains that the dark creatures show people horrible nightmares and then feed on their fear. Alma says that he summoned them and hid them well before the battle. Raul was surprised that Alma can use summoning magic. Alma says that the bandits will not wake up until the creatures have had their fill of their fears. Evan lay on the ground and cried. Alma wondered what Evan was dreaming about. Raul laughed and said that it was funny to watch Evan cry. He was glad that the bandit got what he deserved. Raul apologizes to Alma. The boy turns his head towards him. Raul says that he tried to help him, and in the end, the boy had to help him. Alma sighed. Raul says he believed in his abilities, but remained weak. The guy asked Raul not to talk about himself like that. Alma convinces him that he came to this place to give one thing. Raul asks what Alma wants to give him. Alma handed over the registration card. He reminded the boy of what was a very important thing for an adventurer. Raul blushed and began to cry. Alma smiled and said that Raul would become a good adventurer. He believes in the boy. Raul looks at Alma with a smile and cries. Alma helps Raul get up from the ground. At this point, the guy thanks him and says that he will return the debt. Raul and Alma go to Luna. Alma knocks on the door of her room. Luna looks out and sees Alma. Luna saw the bandits and asked who they were. Alma turned around and said he needed a ride to the guild. But first he decided to look in on the girl. The guy turns back to the girl and says he has made a decision. The girl looks at him excitedly. Alma presses her hand to her chest and says she agrees. He suggests the girl go home. A bird chirped outside the window. Alma was lying on the floor, holding onto the sheet on the bed. Alma stood up and put his hand to his head, closing his eyes from the pain. In honor of the fact that they decided to go to the moon's homeland together, they threw a party. The guy thinks that they drank a lot. Alma puts her finger to her forehead and uses restoration magic. He turns around and sees Luna lying on his bed. He tries to figure out what she's doing in his bed. The girl began to wake up. She got out of bed and, looking at the guy with one eye, wished him good morning. The guy completely forgot about the moon not being able to extend the lease, so he invited her to spend the night at his place. He was glad that nothing had happened. Luna looked at the guy for a while, then turned away and said that she had fun last night. Alma, Luna, and Raul were riding in a carriage. Alma asked the boy why he was smiling. While Raul was thinking about what to answer, Alma was eager to leave the trading city to go to Luna's homeland. Raul finally decides to answer Alma's question. He raises his index finger and asks if he and Luna went to the guild. Alma asks what's going on there. Raul tells how the bandits bowed down and asked for forgiveness from all the adventurers. Evan cried and begged for forgiveness. Raul also says that the bandits suddenly started apologizing and returning all the money. He suggests that they were influenced by nightmares. Then Raul turns to Luna and says that he unexpectedly came along with them. He asks if his presence is a nuisance. Luna says it's fine. The guy seems pretty capable to her. Raul suggests that, in this case, we form a team. Alma asks how they can do that. Raul asks if the guy really agrees. Alma says he doesn't mind, but he's never joined a team. In his past life, Alma always trained alone, so he agrees to form a team. Alma thinks it will be fun. Luna supports the guy. Raul sits there with a satisfied expression, and then suddenly raises the volume of his voice and says that in that case, it's time for them to start the welcoming gift competition. Alma and Luna look at the guy in bewilderment. Raul says he will begin. He offers the wind cutter as a gift. Alma thinks that this gift helps to sharpen swordsmanship much faster, as well as wind magic. He knows that it is quite difficult. Raul says that this is a mandatory ritual when forming a team. He explains that the person with the worst gift buys the food. Luna looks at the guy in confusion, and Alma asks why the ritual is so strange. Raul chuckles as he doesn't think he can lose. He turns to the girl and asks what she will give as a gift. The girl says the word sage. Alma remembers her father. The sage is what he desperately wanted before, and not only him, but his brothers and many other people. Raul admires the gift and says that he has never met sages. The girl is embarrassed. Alma remembers that this gift allowed his father to exert a huge influence on everyone. He did not suspect that he would so easily meet a person with such a gift. Luna pats Raul on the shoulder and says that wind cutter is also a good gift. Raul agrees, but still admits that he was too confident. Raul turns to Alma and asks what the boy will give as a gift. He asks what amazing and rare ability he has. Alma freezes for a few seconds. At that moment, he had too many thoughts in his head. Raul calls out to Alma, as the boy does not answer him for a long time. Alma wonders what will happen if his companions find out that he was kicked out of the house because he does not have the gift. He considers lying, but he does not want to lie to Luna and Raul. Raul says that the guy doesn't have to tell. He's not forcing him. The guy turns to Luna and says that there's no need to overstep yourself. He asks if everything he says is right. Luna agrees and says she just wanted to brag a little. She turns to Alma and says he doesn't have to. Alma is embarrassed. He thanks his friends and promises to tell them about it later. Alma realizes that he has made great friends. He considers himself very lucky. Raul doesn't know Alma's gift, but he says with certainty that the guy is very strong. He saw that Alma can use Volt and summoning magic. He wonders what else the guy can do. Luna says that Alma can also use teleportation magic. She also says that his overall teleportation level is impressive. Raul is amazed by Alma's abilities and asks if there is anything he can't do. The guy thinks that there is no such thing. Alma heard that if you want to know the level of abilities and skills, you need to use the spell Assessment. He asks if he can use it on the guys. They agree. Raul says that he became very interested. Alma covers her eyes and casts a spell that causes a bright flash, blinding Luna and Raul. After the flash, Alma sees Raul's characteristics, and then he turns his gaze to the moon and sees its characteristics. Alma thinks about it. Luna and Raul ask what the guy saw. He says that there are different numbers that evaluate their skills. Alma notices that Raul is level 21. He thinks that this is a great result, considering that he received the gift this year. Thanks to his gift, Raul is quite fast. The guy also notices that his friend has not only a high level, he is also impressed by attack power and agility. Alma also saw that Luna recently received the gift. Raul asks what stats Alma has. Luna thinks she has a lot. Alma looks away and says his stats are a little higher. He suggests that it's not entirely a lie. Alma changes the subject and says that Luna, as someone who recently received her gift, has a very high magic stat. He can confidently say that she is much better than most of her peers. Alma notes that Luna's other stats are low. He adds that Raud's other abilities are higher in numbers. Luna talks about how she defeated monsters along the way. She assumes that this made her magic level increase. Raul is surprised at how simple it is. Luna says that she wanted to practice magic on someone. At these words, Alma thinks about how he doesn't remember the monsters he fought in his past life. He only focused on improving his magic power. He assumes that Luna will become one of the greatest magicians. Raul suddenly notices that they did not meet any monsters on the way. He finds this strange. The coachman turns around and says that they should meet goblins on the way. Then he suggests that they might have left, but he found it all suspicious. The man also suggested that the goblins might have left because of a stronger enemy. The carriage continued its journey to the city. At this time, it was being watched by a huge monster that looked like a wolf. It followed the carriage without attracting unnecessary attention. Alma looked suspiciously at the carriage windows, not noticing anything but feeling that something was wrong. And Raul asked the coachman not to say such things, so as not to attract unnecessary trouble. In a cart, Luna, Alma, and Raul reached the city closest to the border between the territories. They passed the checkpoint and set off on foot. Raul, Luna, and Alma set off. To get to Luna's domain, they had to go through the forest. Luna said that it would take 2 days. Raul and Alma were prepared for a long journey. They decided that they would need to make a halt. Somewhere on the edge of the forest, the whole company decided to stop and rest. Luna made a fire. Raul set up the tents. Alma came up to the girl. They sat together near the fire and talked. Alma's storage contained equipment from his past life. He decided to use it. There were many different products. Even the water was drinkable. The moon was unhappy. She talked about how when she left the estate, she had to take a large backpack with her. She found it inconvenient to travel with it. She wanted to have a storage facility like that. Raul laughs. He thought that traveling with a backpack was much more interesting. He says that thanks to Alma, Luna returns home light. The guy tried to cheer the girl up. Alma says that the area is too peaceful and quiet. He wonders if there might be a monster nearby. He thought it was suspicious because he was still expecting monsters to attack. He hears some sounds coming from the bushes. The guy turns his head and sees a huge wolf looking at him. The guy is wary at first because the wolf is staring at him intently. 4. But then Alma recognized Fenrir. He realized that the small monsters did not approach them because Fenrir was nearby. All the monsters were afraid of the huge wolf that followed the company. While Ryula and Luna were discussing food, Alma was thinking about Fenrir. He knew that the wolf had high intelligence and incredible fighting abilities. Some individuals even became masters of the forest. Suddenly, the boy hears a voice in his head, asking him a question. Alma realizes that Fenrir is using telepathy. He doesn't think he's met Fenrir before. Fenrir says they're strangers. He tells him he came to the boy to see what kind of monster had appeared in the forest. Alma wonders if Fenrir is talking about him. Fenrir asks if Alma knows how much mana he has. The boy looked Fenrir straight in the eyes. He says that if the wolf means the amount of mana, then the boy is aware of how much he has. Alma remembers how much effort he put into training. He believes that all this was not in vain. He knows a huge number of different spells. In addition, he knows how to use them at the highest level. Fenrir says that Alma's magical power scared away the monsters, causing the entire forest to be in turmoil. Alma tried to understand how his magical power, and not Fenrir's, could scare away the monsters. After the incident in the tavern, Alma made a special effort to contain the mana inside his body and only released it when he cast a spell. The guy suggests that wild animals have a stronger sense than humans. Alma decides that it is impossible to leave it like that. He forms a seal with his hands and uses the concealment magic, Nemuris. The spread of the boy's magical aura has become smaller. Fenrir looks at the boy in shock. He can't believe that all traces of the aura have disappeared. It seems to him as if he is looking through a fog. The wolf did not expect the boy to solve this problem so quickly. Suddenly, the wolf became alert and looked towards where Raul and Luna were standing. He sensed something was wrong. He was ready to defend himself and counterattack. At that moment, Luna was sitting near the fire with Raul. It seemed to the girl that Alma's aura seemed to fade. She turned around and called Alma. Raul noticed Luna's confusion and asked what happened. Fenrir looks menacingly at Luna and Raul. He understands that he has finally been noticed. Luna and Raul looked at Fenrir with horror and began to scream in fear. They did not expect to see a huge wolf. Raul falls to the ground and tries to crawl away. He sees Fenrir and says that he is an S-class monster. The guy begins to guess that it is because of him that they have not met a single monster yet. Alma looks at his comrades. He admits that he is the only one to blame. Alma stood up and asked Raul to calm down. He tried to convince him that Fenrir is not hostile. The next second, Fenrir gave the command to duck. Alma looked at the wolf and did not understand why he gave the command to duck. Then Alma turned his gaze to Luna. He noticed that some unfamiliar pressure was coming from the girl. Luna formed a seal with her hands, glaring at Fenrir. A silhouette of a woman appeared behind her. The girl cast the spell, Grace. The silhouette behind her released a powerful stream of magic. Fenrir was wary. He looked the girl in the eyes. The wolf saw that the girl was determined. She used one of the most powerful spells. Luna's magical attack did not reach Fenrir. Fenrir and Luna were very surprised, as her magic seemed to simply dissipate. They did not understand what happened, so they just stood there and looked at each other in shock. At that moment, Alma approaches the wolf and says that he dispelled the spell on the machine. He says that the wolf could use some help. He didn't want the conflict to escalate. Fenrir turns his gaze to Alma. The boy apologizes and says that Luna was a little scared. He apologizes again. He did not expect that the girl would immediately start attacking him. Fenrir says that he should apologize too, since he showed up in the middle of the night. He thinks that was rude, especially since he didn't want to scare the travelers and fight them. Then Alma turns to the girl and convinces her that the wolf is not hostile. He says that if Fenrir wanted to attack, it would have attacked before they had time to notice it. The girl agrees with the guy. Then she finally calms down and lowers her hands. She was not going to attack anymore. The girl was going to listen to Fenrir. She was wondering why the wolf came to them. Alma wonders what kind of spell Luna used. He guessed that the girl used the spell Eternal Fatigue. He noticed that the wavelength of the magic wave was most similar to summoning magic, but he was not sure. At this point, Fenrir clarifies that she is a female, not a male. She was wary of the way the guy addressed her, so she decided to clarify. Luna asks if Alma can really talk to Fenrir. Alma replies that she can talk to the wolf through telepathy. Luna is amazed that the guy knows so many more spells than she, who is a sage. 4. Raul was hiding behind a tree at the time. He asked Alma why Lady Fenrir had come to visit them. Alma wanted to answer, but the she-wolf interrupted him and said that in fact someone wanted to meet with him. Alma asked who wanted to meet him and for what purpose. The she-wolf said that this person was interested in Alma's aura. The guy answered that he would not mind meeting someone new. Alma understood that Fenrir came only because of this meeting. Alma wondered what kind of high-ranking creature was accompanying Fenrir herself. The she-wolf thanks the guy and tells him that her son wanted to meet him. Suddenly, a little wolf cub appears near the she-wolf. 475. The wolf cub was very happy. He looked at Alma with wide-open eyes and admired him. The animal noticed that the guy was not scary at all. He expected to see a terrible monster, but this was an ordinary person. Alma looked at the little animal in confusion. Then Luna and Raul joined him, blushing because the little wolf cub was so cute. Raul, Luna, and Alma looked at the wolf cub with concern. The wolf cub was riding on his back and talking about how he was a fan of Alma. Then the wolf cub stood up and started wagging his tail, asking if he scared Luna, Raul, and Alma. Luna and Raul were very embarrassed. Their faces turned red because they thought the wolf cub was cute. Alma, at that moment, just looked at the wolf cub and rubbed the back of his head with his hand. Luna came up to the wolf cub and started petting him. She asked where the best place to pet him was. Raul said that the wolf cub really liked being petted because he was very fluffy, like his mother. The wolf cub asked to be petted even more. Alma realized that the wolf cub was happy with everything. While Raul was asking Luna to let him pet the wolf cub too, Alma turned around and looked at Fenrir. Alma turns completely to the wolf. She asks him what a creature like Alma would want in these lands. The boy thought for a moment, and then said that he had some business in the land beyond the forest. The boy was confused by the fact that Luna had not told him anything specific. The wolf turned her head and thought about the words about the domain that was beyond the forest. The wolf assumes that this is most likely the very place where the forest monsters rule in the fields. Alma asks what kind of monsters these are. The wolf tells her that recently this forest has been producing little edible fruit. So many monsters have appeared and are heading to human settlements in search of food. Alma thought about it. He remembered that Tonatat, where they had stopped earlier, was a small territory. He assumed that Luna's domain would be about the same size. Monster attacks on such territories have serious consequences for the inhabitants. People begin to move closer to the capital. There may be a shortage of workers. Alma thought that this was the problem he had to solve. This was what he had to help Luna with. It would be even easier for him then, since he wouldn't have to deal with dispersing monsters. Alma looks up and thanks the wolf for the information. Fenrir just chuckles. She then asks what Alma will do next. She wonders if she should order the monsters not to attack those lands. Alma smiles and says that everything is fine. He decides that he will take advantage of the situation. The she-wolf tenses up. She asks if Alma has any bad intentions. Alma smiles again and tells the she-wolf not to worry. He thinks his plan will be beneficial to both sides. Thus, Alma was able to convince the she-wolf. Fenrir says that Alma's heart is much purer than other people's. The boy asks how a she-wolf can see his heart. The she-wolf replies that this is more of a conclusion based on experience. Alma does not understand what is being discussed. The she-wolf tells us that, in her 1,000 years of life, she has seen many people. She can understand what kind of person is standing in front of her just by looking into his eyes. Alma notes that the wolf likes people. Fenrir agrees with him. She says that it is not in vain that she tries to live closer to their villages. Fenrir says that if Alma, Raul, and Luna need her help, they can come to her anytime. She does not intend to remain in Alma's debt. The little wolf approaches his mother and says that he will go with Alma. The she-wolf forbids her son to go with the people. At this point, the she-wolf and her son leave Alma, Luna, and Raul. They spent the rest of the night in silence. Alma thinking that he had put Fenrir in his debt simply by meeting her son. Alma put out the fire and set off with Luna and Raul. Alma and his companions reached the settlement, or rather the territory of Fandol. This was Luna's homeland. Luna pointed with her hand where they should go, and the whole group continued on their way. Alma stopped and saw an axe that had been left in a stump. The settlement was deserted. Raul put his hands behind his head and also noticed that there were no people in the settlement. He said that the settlement was much more provincial than he expected. Alma agrees with Raul. Alma looks up and sees birds sitting on a tree branch. Near this tree is a house where Luna and everyone else stop. Luna turned around and asked what happened. Raul replied that nothing had happened. He convinces the girl that they were just discussing what a nice place this settlement is. Alma agrees with the guy and says that peace and quiet reign in this settlement. Luna turns to them fully and blushes. She agrees with them and says that this is a really nice place and that the people in this settlement are kind. Raul says they should continue on their way. He puts his hands behind his head again and walks forward, followed by Alma. Alma notices that Luna loves this settlement and her homeland, as well as its inhabitants, with all her heart. The boy could not wait until he had a chance to talk to the locals. Finally, the whole company approaches a 2-story house. Luna says that this is where she lives. The girl opens the door and announces that she has returned home. Someone's quick steps are heard, and a girl suddenly crashes into Luna and screams that her sister has returned. Luna doesn't have time to react, and her sister laughs with joy. Luna and her sister crash into a tree. Raul and Alma look at the girls with concern. As Luna puts her hand to the place where she hit the tree trunk, her sister is happy to be back. She asks Luna how she's doing. Then she asks if everything is okay with her health. Luna's sister asks if the girl remembers that she has no idea where she is. That's why she was worried about her sister and that she wouldn't be able to return home. Luna's sister was very happy that she finally saw Luna safe and sound. She hugs her sister tighter. Luna blushes and says that she would have definitely found her way home. Her sister agrees with her and adds that the girl is terrible at navigating the area but has an excellent sense of smell. Luna asks the girl to stop. She says that she got her clothes dirty because of her. The sister says that her outfit was already not very clean. Luna asks her not to make excuses. Alma, as soon as he heard about his sister, immediately understood that Luna was the eldest child in the house. Luna says that something else is important at the moment. She points to Alma and says that he will help them solve the problem. Then the girl moves her hand to Raul and says that he comes with Alma. The guy starts to get indignant. Luna introduces her sister, whose name is Sanya, to Alma. She tells her that Sanya is her younger sister. Alma approaches the girl and says that he is glad to meet her. He counts on her help in the future. The guy notices that the girl reciprocates his feelings, but looks very wary. He does not understand why the girl has such a reaction. The man with the mustache thanks Alma and Raul for coming all the way to get to Fandol. The man introduces himself as Eric. He also points to the woman and says that she is his wife, whose name is Mabel. Mr. Eric is Luna's father and the owner of these lands. He and his wife Mabel seem like good people, so they gave a warm welcome to Alma and Raul. Everyone was hospitable, except Luna's sister. Luna suddenly turned to her sister and said that Alma and Raul had come to the settlement from Talistella at her request. She asked not to make some kind of addition out of her. She asked her sister not to be impolite to the guests. Sanya thought about the words about Talistel. The girl turns to her sister and reminds her that she was going to look for a strong man in the dungeon of the labyrinth city of Labistel. Sanya starts shaking her sister Luna and telling her that Talistella is a trading city. Sanya is convinced that her sister has no idea how to navigate the area. She asked why the girl doesn't check what city she is in. That's why she told her not to travel alone. Luna says that everyone can make a mistake. Alma thought that Luna was completely defeated. He looked at the girls and thought that it was possible to imagine that Sanya was Luna's older sister and not the other way around. Sanya notices that Alma is watching her. She gets embarrassed and turns away. The guy was wondering why Sanya is so wary. After dinner, Alma and Luna's father went to see the farmer. They asked about the monsters. The man said that recently the fields conquered by monsters have only increased. He tells them that he put up a scarecrow, thinking that it would scare them away. The next day, after arriving in Fandol, Eric took Alma to meet the residents and listen to their stories. The man confirms that everything is exactly as the residents say. For the past few years, they have been periodically attacked by monsters. The last time was just a few days ago. Alma understood that the lands were not the most fertile anyway, but fortunately, the monsters did not attack people. However, the decrease still affects trade, and trade in turn affects the budget, and the budget affects the development of the territory. At this rate, the standard of living in this settlement will never rise. Eric says that he is the head of the land, but he can neither defeat the monsters nor find a way to make the land more fertile. This irritates him greatly. Alma notices that the man is very passionate about his work. Behind his gentle temperament lies a passionate nature that is concerned about the troubles of the inhabitants of his domain. Luna grew up watching Eric, so they are very similar. Suddenly, the man becomes wary. He turns to Alma and apologizes. He didn't want to put any more pressure on the guy. The man is already glad that Alma and Raul have traveled such a long way to their settlement. He asks the boy not to hurry and look around slowly. Alma notices that Luna's behavior is very similar to her father. The man tries to say something else, but Luna comes up to them and interrupts him. Alma turns around and sees Sanya walking into the forest. The guy wondered what Sanya was going to do in the forest. Alma turns back to Eric and remembers what he said about the monsters becoming more active. The man confirms this information and says that this applies in particular to poisonous lizards. He mentions that now is the time to lay eggs. That is why lizards are stocking up on food. It is better not to approach lizard nests at this time. Sanya was walking through the forest. She was clenching her hand into a fist near her chest. Suddenly, she came to a huge tree and realized that she had found the very place she was looking for. There were a huge number of lizards near this tree. The girl leaned over and used her finger to determine which way the wind would blow. Then she took out a bag of pollen from a sleep-inducing flower and used it on the lizards. The animals immediately fell fast asleep. The girl walked through the lizards and found what she was looking for. Sonia wanted to take the eggs, but without her sister, alone, she wouldn't be able to take them all. Suddenly, one of the lizards wakes up and starts hissing at the girl. Sonia turns around and is surprised that the pollen hasn't put the creature to sleep for a few hours. Then the lizard lifts its head and spits hard in the girl's direction. Sonia's eyes widen in fear. The spit hits the tree trunk and eats away at its bark. The lizard doesn't understand where the girl could have gone. Alma managed to grab Sonia and lift her onto a tree branch. The guy turned to the girl and asked if she was okay. The girl screamed. The guy assumed that one of the lizards was already asleep when Sonia was spraying pollen. He says that the metabolism was reduced and the pollen did not work. The girl looks at the guy in shock. Alma says that he followed the girl out of curiosity for a reason. He says that now she can tell why she went into the forest and found the lizard's nest. He wanted to know what was going on. The girl became embarrassed. Sonia thanked the guy for saving her. Together, they dropped from the tree branch to the ground. Alma turned to the girl again and asked why she had climbed into the nest of poisonous lizards and why she wanted their eggs. The girl said that she did not need the lizard eggs. Sonia talks about the nest being filled with the harvest that the lizards stole from their fields. The guy knew that the settlement was suffering losses due to the destruction of the fields by monsters, but the situation did not seem so critical to him. Alma says that if Sonia just wants to eat, it would be safer to just catch some kind of animal. The girl starts to get angry. She raises her voice and says that it is not about that. The girl starts to explain why she did it. Tears start to flow from her eyes. Sonia talks about how if the monsters continue to ravage their fields and lands, her father will be removed from his position as lord of these lands. Alma and Sonia return home. The girl falls asleep near the bookcase in her father's study. Eric was upset that Sonia had told him about his difficult situation. He puts his hand on the table and turns around. Eric says that he will soon be removed from his position as lord. Alma clarifies that he still does not know all the details. The man sighs. Eric tells us that Fandol has not paid the established tribute for several years in a row. The man explains that they are obliged to send a part of their harvest to the capital every year, but due to the attack of monsters, it is barely enough for the residents themselves. This became the reason for the discussion of his competence as a lord among the capital's authorities. The man tells that in 3 days, a detachment from the capital will arrive in this settlement, and he must prepare the harvest before their arrival. It became clear to Alma why Sonia went for such recklessness. Raul raises his hand and says he doesn't know the whole situation, but he still suggests they just buy the rest of the crop from other cities. Mabel says they've thought about that too. The woman tells that every year they have to pay 5,000 harem, but from all the fields they only got 1,500 harem. The woman adds and says that in addition, the quality of the products must be at least B grade. A lot of money will be spent on one such purchase and transportation of such a batch. Raul was dejected after hearing all this. Eric says there are only 3 days left. He is convinced there is no way out. He says he will be removed from his position and perhaps even accused of harming someone else's interests. Sonia gets up and says that her father is not guilty of anything. Everyone looks at the girl attentively. Sonia gets angry. She looks at Alma and says that a huge number of people came before him. The girl says that all those people said that they would find a way to help their settlement, and her father immediately believed them. All those people simply ran away at some point. The girl raises her voice and says that the lands were not fertile from the beginning, but now they were also being ravaged by monsters. Sonia repeats again that her father is not guilty of anything. She convinces Alma that there are many other people who are truly guilty. She wonders why only her father is blamed for everything. Eric walked up to the girl and put his hand on her head, thanking her. He is proud of his daughter and the way she has grown up, able to be angry when he himself cannot allow himself to be. Eric reminds that he is the head of the lands, and he is the one who trusted those people. He understands that he must bear responsibility, but Sonia does not understand this. Luna looks at her loved ones with regret. She would like to return earlier to somehow help her loved ones. Alma understands that he needs to get at least 3,500 more harem harvest, but he won't be able to get that much from the storage. The guy has a thought that he wants this family to smile again. Eric turns to Alma and says that they won't be able to give the boy a decent reward, so he's not going to persuade him. But he still hopes that when the new lord comes, Alma will share her wisdom with him and the villagers. Eric is convinced that the poverty of these lands is not the fault of the people, but only of himself, their ruler. Alma was amazed that even at such a moment, Eric thought only about the well-being of the inhabitants of the settlement. Alma smiles and says he will do everything he can. Eric asks if the boy will really do it. He is glad that even after he is gone, the lands will not be in trouble. Alma says she will not wait for the moment when men are removed from the position of lord of the lands. The guy assumes that his attempt to help the residents is simply a manifestation of his selfishness. Eric's eyes widen in surprise as he sees the boy open his vault. The man asks what Alma is going to do. Alma wants Eric to remain the local lord, so he plans to harvest the missing 3,500 harem crops in 3 days. He wonders what quality the crops should be. Raul puts his hand on the boy's shoulder and supports him. Luna squeezes her hand on her clothes and looks at the boy with admiration. At this time, in the castle, 2 men were discussing the arrival of the capital's detachment and preparations for its arrival. The man with the long hair approached Mr. Julius with a complaint. He did not understand why he was given such a difficult task. The man raises his hand and says that he and his unit have served the country faithfully. He believes that the task his unit is being given is reckless. He asks the man to think about what will happen to the territory and the people. Julius says the man is wrong. He convinces him that the country is a single living organism. Therefore, in order for it to continue to function, they must get rid of unnecessary territory. Otherwise, the country will end. The man thinks that it is useless to talk to Julius. He snaps his fingers, and mercenaries in armor appear behind him. They all stand in a fighting stance. Julius just stares at the man and his mercenaries. One of the mercenaries asks if they really have to do this. The man raises his sword and says it's too late for them to think about what's right. The man turns to Julius and tells him to get ready. Within minutes, all the mercenaries and their leader were trapped in ice blocks. Julius was the strongest mage in the kingdom, so it was easy for him to deal with the mercenaries. Julius says that the mercenaries were sinners who filled their pockets with money and evaded taxes. He orders his men to deal with them. The knights obey Julius. Julius turns to Sir Edward and asks if there is any other unresolved matter. The man lowers his head and says there is one problem. He says they need to discuss Fandol's condition. Julius and Edward are walking down the hallway. Julius asks if Edward wanted to talk about the situation in Fandol. Edward says that the harvest delivery time is coming soon. It takes a long time to prepare in that settlement, as the area is quite remote. Julius thinks for a second, then tells Sir Edward to proceed according to plan. He says that even though this is a wilderness, it borders the Western Kingdom and is an important strategic point. Julius is convinced that under any circumstances, the territory must be completely under their control. Julius orders Edward to deal with the Lord if he becomes a nuisance. He also adds that Edward can do whatever he wants with everything else. Edward does as he is told. The next day, Edward arrives at Fandol with a court appraiser named Cedric. The appraiser says that this is a typical borderland. Cedric and Edward are met by Eric. He bows and says he is glad to welcome guests. Edward is surprised that the Lord himself came out to meet them. Eric at this moment points his hand at his estate and asks the guests to make themselves at home. Edward notices that Eric is quite relaxed. He heard that their harvest volumes have not reached the required volumes for a long time. Therefore, it seems to him that Eric could have easily thrown rotten products into the boxes with the harvest in order to collect the required amount. Eric leads the guest to the boxes with the harvest. When they approach the boxes with the harvest, Edward's eyes widen in surprise. Eric points to the boxes with the harvest and says that there are 5,000 units of harvest installed there. Edward was shocked. He was trying to understand what was going on. Eric at this point says that there is one small problem. He tells that there are B-rank fruits in the boxes, but most of them are A-rank. He asks if Edward is okay with that. Edward thinks this is nonsense. Cedric at this point inspects the harvest and, turning to Sir Edward, says that Eric is not lying. He convinces the man that there is no doubt. Cedric says the harvest is definitely A-grade quality. The appraiser is amazed that in his long career he has never seen such excellent product. Edward still thinks this is crazy. He knows that Fandol never had the finances or equipment to produce such a crop. He wonders how it is possible. Cedric, as a researcher, is also interested in how they were able to grow such an amazing crop. Eric points to Alma and says that he will be the one to explain the details to them. The guy steps forward and says that he is glad to meet Edward. He gives his name and tells the man that he is from the fellow's family. He tells the man that Edward can just call him Alma. Edward thinks about it at this point. He thinks that there was a family name like that among the nobles of the Eastern Empire. Eric says that Alma acts as an advisor to the settlement. Alma asks Cedric and Edward to follow him. He understood that Edward wanted to thoroughly explore all their fields. Thus, Alma led Cedric and Edward to the fields with harvest. Edward noted that the field was quite fertile. Cedric could not imagine that the soil was not exhausted even after such a bountiful harvest. Alma says that they planted these beds in the morning. Edward and Cedric gape in amazement. They couldn't believe that the beds were planted in the morning. They think it's impossible. Cedric asks if the guy means by this that in less than a day the seed has grown into a product ready for harvest. Alma activates his vault and says that he used one very important item during landing. Cedric is surprised because he sees that this is the fertilizer of the god of fertility. It is given by God himself. The fertilizer controls the growth and quality of the crops. The guy talks about how mixing this fertilizer with soil can significantly speed up the growth of any agricultural crop. Cedric starts shaking Alma by the shoulders and asking where he got such a valuable thing. Alma raises her eyebrows in surprise and asks how such an object could be valuable. Cedric says he's only read about things like this in books. It all reminds Alma of something. Cedric explains that according to legend, any field sown with this fertilizer will yield a bountiful harvest for at least 100 years. The farmers are left gaping in amazement after hearing this. At this moment, Raul approaches Alma and is surprised that the guy is also a talented farmer. Alma smiles and says that he just had this item lying around. Then Cedric points to the rocks that were in the beds and asks what they are. Cedric thinks they are just some rocks. Alma talks about magic crystals, which are crystallized, highly concentrated magic essence. He tells that in ancient times, the magic crystal was known as the Stone of the Gods. It was used in various rituals. Alma thinks that there is no need to explain such things to the capital scientist, but he still reminds that in the process of growing various crops, the nutrients contained in the soil are very important. One of the main sources of these substances is the magical essence of the earth. Magical essence is particles of mana that are contained in all inanimate objects. It is found both in the ground and in the air. Alma also explains that the essence moves from item to item. The higher the concentration of the essence, the better the harvest. That's why Alma placed magic crystals all over the field to increase this very concentration. Raul pretends to be surprised. At that moment, Sonia turns to him and says that the guy has already heard about this before. Cedric covers his mouth with his hand, as he was surprised that such a method was used. He was amazed by Alma's genius. He wondered why they hadn't thought of something like this themselves. Edward thinks about the magical essence. He remembers that its concentration in the soil and air is usually extremely low, and crystallization is simply impossible in the natural environment. The man also heard that in the era of adventurers, similar crystals were found in the very depths of dungeons where extremely aggressive monsters lived. The man understands that such a rare item cannot be used en masse in agriculture, so he asks where the guy got these magic crystals. Alma realizes that he can't say he took them from the dungeon he was protecting to hone his skills. He comes up with a story about them being a family heirloom. The man didn't even think that this thing was so valuable. He understands the reason for such an increase in the quality and quantity of the harvest. He finds it suspicious that there are too few people in this village. They would not have time to sow and harvest such large quantities so quickly. Edward asks if Alma hired any extra labor. The guy replies that he did not hire any extra labor. Alma notes that Edward is very smart and believes that it was not for nothing that he rose to his post in the capital. Alma begins to explain that he asked not to show himself to the creatures who helped them, as he was afraid that the man would be very surprised. Edward asks what that means. Alma whistles, and Edward's eyes widen in surprise when he sees animals, or rather monsters, running towards the field. Alma tells him that these are the same monsters that were ravaging the fields. He explains that at the moment they are completely under control and in exchange for food they help as a workforce. Edward asks how this is possible. Alma points to the devil's relief and says that it is because of it that the monsters obey him. The devilish relief depicted a demon king who had subjugated an endless number of monsters. The relief with his image possessed a strong magical energy that attracted and subjugated the monsters. Edward asks if this stone can ensure that monsters do not attack people. Alma explains that most of the monsters in the area are unable to resist the stone's effects. He remembers Fenrir and thinks that she is special. Raul at this time makes one of the monsters jump over a ring of fire. He spreads his arms out to the sides and says that monsters are even capable of such tricks. Edward looks at the stunts the monsters are doing in amazement. The man thinks it's all impossible. He was alarmed by the fact that the devilish relief was a thing from the demon world. He thinks that their pride would not allow them to simply give away their heritage to a human. He wonders how the relief ended up in the hands of a man from such a remote place, and a child like Alma at that. Alma says that the man might be shocked by all this, but he still tries to convince him that the monsters are completely under his control. Alma scares Edward. The man wonders who Alma really is. At this point, Cedric wipes away his tears and says that this is all amazing. He is amazed at how Alma could come up with the idea of subduing monsters and using them as a workforce. Cedric believes that this is an ideal solution for border areas where the population is much smaller. Alma looks at Cedric and wonders if all appraisers are so sentimental. Cedric turns to Edward and asks him what he thinks about all this. Edward says that Cedric is right. He claims that Fandol was an unremarkable borderland a few days ago, but now it has been transformed. Edward says that he should report this to his supervisor as soon as possible. At this point, Sonia approaches them and asks if her father will remain as Lord. Cedric convinces the girl that she does not have to worry about this. As a court appraiser, he will do everything he can to promote the lands as a role model. The guy promises that if everything goes well, they will be able to increase funding for the lands. Cedric and Edward get into the carriage and then drive back. Raul is happy that they succeeded. Alma is happy too. He turns to the man and says that Eric is also a good man. Eric can't believe it all. He starts crying and says that a couple of days ago he was ready to leave his post and his people. He thanks Alma for his help. Sonia approaches the guy and says that Alma is incredible. She couldn't believe that he actually managed to change the situation in just 3 days. At this point, Luna joins her and says that Alma is different from everyone else. Sonia does not understand what her sister is talking about. Luna turns to her sister and says that Alma is completely different from those who came to help them. Sonia lets go of his head and agrees with the girl. At this point, Alma felt strange, because everything seemed to have gone well, but for some reason he had a bad feeling. The guy wondered if he could have made a mistake somewhere. As the carriage drove along, Cedric insisted to Edward that Fandol was inimitable. He had not thought that these lands were so developed until he saw them for himself. Edward agrees with the appraiser. A week has passed since Sir Edward and Cedric left. The lands of the settlement have changed significantly. Alma, with the help of monsters, was able to restore the roads and repair many houses. Alma and Luna heard someone barking. The boy lowered his head and saw a wolf cub. He brought the cart and received a reward from his grandmother. Alma notes that people have already gotten used to the monsters, despite the fact that they were afraid of them at first. Alma approaches the old man and activates her vault. He uses the vault to water the crops. The old man turns to Alma and asks if he can really get as much water from the storage tank as he wants. Alma replies that this is not the case at all. He explains that the space of his storage is directly dependent on the amount of his mana, so it is limited. Suddenly, the boy hears someone say that it is not fair. He turns around and sees Luna. Luna glared at Alma. She says that when she helped carry water, her whole body ached the next day. She is angry that Alma simply used magic that she does not even understand. Sonia comes up to them and says that it is not Alma's fault that Luna is so frail. She reminds them that the girl herself preferred to sit in her room all day and night without leaving. Luna justifies herself by saying that it was a thorough study of magic. Sonia asks if that is why Luna cannot use magic. She again reminds that Luna even has difficulty finding her way home. Raul tried to calm them down, but he agreed that Alma's magic was a scam. The boy thought about it. Then he turned around and asked why he didn't start training Luna. He thought he could teach her how to use the vault. Luna leads Alma to her room. They go inside and Luna goes to her bed, and Alma looks around and notices a huge number of books on the shelves. The girl was embarrassed and tried to explain such a large number of books, but the guy stopped her. Alma begins to talk about the fact that in order to master the storage, you need to remember 2 conditions. The first condition is that the mana must be at least 1,000 units. The second condition is that Luna must learn the teleport spell, which belongs to spatial magic. Luna guesses that her mana capacity will change. At the moment, she only had 600 units. She understood that she needed to increase her capacity by 400 units first. Luna turns around and is about to leave the room. She says that she needs to go into the forest for a while to defeat some monsters. Alma stops the girl. The guy is sure that this will take a very long time, so he suggests using a detour. The girl asks what this means. The guy uses the storage and takes out a golden apple that grows in the sacred arena. Eating the apple increases the amount of mana in your body. The guy says that if Luna eats the apple, she will immediately increase her mana level by 500 units. Luna asks if she can really eat it. The guy asks if the girl is embarrassed by the fact that the apple is golden. He says that if the girl does not want to eat it, then they will have to think of another way. Luna takes the apple and says that she trusts the guy. She bites it and says that it is very tasty. She continues to bite the apple because it seems sweet and juicy to her. The girl says that sweetness with a slight sourness creates a perfect harmony, balancing on the tip of the tongue. Alma understands Luna because he himself ate these apples. Alma remembered that the golden apple could raise the mana volume to a maximum of 2,500 units. He looked at the girl and did not dare to stop her. Luna raises her hand and says that she is starting to feel a new power bubbling up in her body. The guy says that this is great news. He explains that it is because her mana is starting to increase. Luna approaches the guy and asks him to give her another apple. He gets scared by the girl's sudden change in behavior and says that she will have to eat the apple later. Alma decides they can move on to the teleporter. Luna asks if this is the same teleporter the boy used. The girl tells about the books she read about teleport. She remembers that it was written about a part of spatial magic that did not survive to their times. She also knew that spatial magic was a rare skill that was difficult to master, so she was a little nervous. Alma thinks about the fact that information from books is not always reliable. He understood that the main difficulty of mastering is precisely the search for reliable educational material. Alma says that, first of all, if a girl wants to use spatial magic, she must be clearly aware of the space around her. The guy reminded that teleportation is a spell for moving a magical entity between two selected points. The girl listened attentively to the guy. She asks if this is why Alma said that they need a place familiar to the moon. The guy confirms. Alma explains that when a person moves his magical essence in space, the distance between point A and exact B is curved to 0, and then it restores its original appearance. Alma explains that the essence of the spell is that a person must manage to move himself between two established points in a short time. Alma believes that the most important part of teleportation is the ability to imagine this process of movement. The girl started waving her hands and saying that she understood everything. It was hard for her to remember so much information. She assures the guy that she can handle it. Alma praises Luna. Luna looks up and asks if the boy can demonstrate the process in practice. Alma suggests that they first move a short distance. The guy moves and asks if the girl remembered. Luna asks the guy to move again. He moves. Sonia enters the room. She announces that the tea is ready. She suggests that Alma and Luna take a break together. At this point, Alma was moving from side to side. He asked if the girl could bring him to Luna's room. Sonia asked Alma what was going on. Alma sits down at the table and starts drinking tea. He asks if Luna is making any progress. He convinces the girl that nothing terrible will happen if she doesn't succeed right away. He reminds her that they have plenty of time. The guy drinks tea and says that Luna has a good sense of magic. He assures her that she just needs time to get the hang of the moves. Alma remembers his past life and how it took him a long time to master this spell. Alma says that the most important thing is patience. Luna at this point says that she understands everything. The girl managed to teleport. Alma looks at her in shock. Luna asks if she really succeeded. Alma was amazed that the girl mastered teleport very quickly. After seeing just one example, Alma looked at Luna and thought that her sense of magic, in addition to the skill of sage, would help her become a very dangerous magician in the future. Alma hands the girl a cup of tea and says that they need to work on the storage next. He also says that she will need to practice teleport. He thinks that the girl will be able to master it very soon. Luna was happy with what had happened. Alma noticed that the girl had blushed. He thought it was cute that the girl really liked magic. Alma notes that Luna is learning very quickly for her age, even faster than Alma. The girl says that she didn't want to tell this. She started learning magic before she got her skill. Luna tells us that her great-grandfather was a famous wizard in the kingdom, so he left a lot of books about magic in the house. As a child, she loved to read them. Alma points out that the girl's love has not weakened at all. Luna looks away and blushes. Luna tells us that her family originally lived in the capital, but her father was disgusted by the constant conflicts between the aristocrats. For their own safety, they decided to move to the lands that had been passed down in their family from generation to generation. Alma remembers his family when he hears about conflicts between aristocrats. He understands that Luna's family was also having a hard time. Luna continues and tells how the locals greeted them with warmth and hospitality. They even helped them build a house so that they would not be left without a roof. They also took seriously the words of her kind father. That's why Luna wanted to repay the inhabitants of the lands in the same way. The girl says that this is why she is very grateful to Alma. The girl smiles and says that with the storage, she will be able to do much more for everyone. Alma remembers that Luna often says that he cheats, but he thinks that the girl's smile is the main cheat. Alma understands that once the infrastructure in this area is fully restored and Luna masters magic, she will be able to cope with any problem, even without his help. Alma feels sad about this, but he thinks it will be much better this way. This way, the inhabitants of the settlement will not rely only on Alma. Suddenly, the boy hears a loud noise. He turns around and Luna asks what happened. Alma says the noise was outside. Luna asks what the noise is. They decide to go outside. Alma approaches Luna's sister and asks what's going on. Sonia turns around and tries to tell her what happened, but she is abruptly interrupted. The knights turn to Eric, Lord of Fandol, asking him not to resist, but to simply follow them. The man wondered what had happened and why they were trying to capture him. The knights convinced the man that he was captured for using monsters for his own personal gain. Everyone looks at the knights in shock. One of the knights demands that the man immediately follow them to the capital for trial on suspicion of treason. 3 days had passed since Mr. Eric was taken to the capital. Alma, along with Luna and Raul, were feeding the monsters. Sonia also helped feed the monsters. She was sitting near the bowl of food from which the wolf cubs were eating. Suddenly, Alma comes up to the girl and says that everything will be fine. The girl turns around and notices that wolf cubs were jumping around the guy. Alma assumes that Eri would have reported that something serious had happened. He thinks that the knights simply want to sort out the situation. Sonia says that her father is innocent. Alma convinces the girl that Eric just needs to insist on his own, and that's all. Sonia agrees with the guy. She believes that she must be strong, protect these lands while her father is not around. Sonia slaps herself on the cheek to cheer up. Alma, Raul, Luna smile, looking at the girl's mood. Raul is happy that Sonia has finally cheered up. He was worried about the girl's condition, because of which she had been depressed for 3 days. Sonia is indignant. At that moment, Alma hears someone talking about wounds. The guy turns around and sees a man whose clothes were torn and his whole face was covered in bruises. The settlers asked what had happened to him. The man replied that he had been attacked in the forest by the king's knights. He assumed that the knights had decided to appropriate the lands while Lord Eric was away. Alma thinks that his bad feeling was not in vain. He is worried about the knights appearing in the forest. Alma examines the man and remembers that he said that he was attacked by knights, but he noticed that the wounds did not seem to be from a sword. He thought that the wounds were from nails. The guy also noticed powder on the man's clothes. The man asks one of the settlers to help him. He says that his wife and daughter are left in the forest. Alma immediately agrees and says that she, Raul, and Luna will go into the forest and survey the situation. The guy turns to Sonia and asks her to take care of the man's wounds. Sonia says that she will do everything in her power. When Alma, Raul, and Luna are walking through the forest, the boy says that it was most likely an illusion. Raul asks what kind of illusion this is. Alma explains that there is a monster that covers its victims with a powder that shows a person their greatest fears. Alma thinks that one of the fears of the locals is the appearance of royal soldiers on their territory. Alma wonders why this man went into the forest specifically to meet dangerous monsters, and even took his family with him. Raul tells Alma that they found the man's mother and daughter, cocoons hanging from a tree branch. Luna says that knights have appeared as well. Raul gets into a fighting stance and asks if this is really a hallucination. At this point, Alma shouts at Raul to turn around and look to the right. Raul manages to block the blow. Fenrir attacks him. Raul looks at the she-wolf with alarm and does not understand why she decided to attack him. Raul asks if this could also be a hallucination. Alma asks and suggests that Luna and Raul are still afraid of the wolf. Raul asks if illusions can harm him. Alma replies that they can. Raul and Alma look down and notice magical stones on the ground. Alma suspects that the enemy is attacking under the guise of illusions. Raul raises his sword again and asks if they really can't just ignore their attacks. Alma replies that they will have to fight. Then he looks forward and is surprised as he notices his father's figure among the knights. Alma is amazed by the power of the powder, which shows a person's fears. He believes that the powder works as it should. It was his father that he did not want to see the most. Luna got into a fighting stance. Raul stood next to her, also preparing for battle. He demanded to be attacked. Raul began to repel all attacks with his sword, and Luna began to use magic. Alma also took part in the battle. Alma understood that the illusion could not copy the skills of the original. The boy decided to use research magic. He assumed that the enemy had hidden his location, but with the help of the magical sensor, Alma would still be able to find him. Alma located the enemy and used the highest wind magic, Super Hurricane. The hurricane dispelled all illusions. Raul Luna was amazed by Alma's power. The next second, Alma shouts at Raul to look up. Raul looks up and notices that a monster similar to us, an insect, is trying to attack him. Raul jumps up and attacks the monster. Luna closes her eyes and uses magic. Alma looks at the tree branch and notices that Raul landed on it after the attack. Raul, Luna, and Alma were able to save the mother and daughter of a man who was injured in the forest. They brought them back. Raul was happy that it was over. Alma became more serious and said that it was not over yet. The boy turns to the man and asks if the three of them really wanted to escape from Fandol. The boy asks if he is right. The man's eyes widen in surprise. Sonia and Luna turn their heads and also look in surprise at the man who has already lowered his head. He suddenly became sad. Luna asks what this all means. Alma suggests that the man and his family decided to go through a dangerous forest instead of a safe road. He also says that he immediately understood this, since among the illusions were the royal knights. The man says that the great sage Julius is to blame for everything. Luna listens attentively to the man. The man tells that on his initiative, Mr. Eric was accused of treason. Alma asks who Mr. Julius is. The man explains that Julius is the greatest magician in the kingdom, with power almost equal to that of the king. Julius is known as a cold-blooded and ruthless prime minister who suppresses any threat to the state. The man tells of how Julius recently beheaded a feudal lord who was suspected of giving bribes. The man heard that Julius was able to suppress a rebellion in the feud in just a couple of days. Sonia presses her hand to her chest and then turns around and looks at her sister, who was looking down sadly. The man at this time says that Alma is not a local, so he does not expect the guy to understand his concerns, but he is worried about what will happen to him and his family when troops are sent to the settlement. The man says that he always thought using monsters was a bad idea. Alma looks at the man, dumbfounded. At this point, Sonia suddenly screams, asking what the man is saying. She reminds him that when their problem was solved, the man was silent, but as soon as some danger appeared, he immediately shifted all his blame onto Alma. Alma turns around, trying to calm Sonia down, but she continues and asks if the man remembers what his father said. Sonia reminds that when he trusts a person, it is only his responsibility. All the settlers looked at the girl silently. At this point, Alma approaches her and thanks her. The guy convinces the girl that he is okay. Sonia tries to say something else, but the guy interrupts her and says that people are just scared. Alma thought that if what the man said was true, he would want to go to the capital and prove Mr. Eric's innocence. But Alma knew that leaving the settlement lands in such disarray was too risky. Alma decided to calm down all the villagers first. The guy presses his hand to his chest and says that he is responsible for the current situation, but he swears to the villagers that if an army comes to this settlement, he will not allow them to be harmed. The boy asks all the villagers to give him some time. The villagers are silent for a while, just bowing their heads. At this point, Raul approaches Alma and asks what he is planning. Raul wonders if Alma is really going to go against an entire army. Alma looks up and says that they should prepare a good defense to at least calm everyone down. Raul asks how they will do it. Alma reassures Raul and says that he already has some ideas. Alma leaves and says that he will be away for a while. He asks Raul and Luna to look after everyone. Raul does not have time to say anything to Alma, and the girls just watch him go. Edward arrived in the kingdom. and, in a meeting with the great sage, began listing all the magical items that Alma had shown during the harvest assessment. Edward believed that the fertility god's fertilizer, magic crystals, and devil's relief were indeed too valuable for a mere border lord. The man assumed that Alma was related to the Empire and possessed demon relics. Edward shares his thoughts on Fandol secretly conspiring with the Empire or one of the greater demons. Julius asks Edward not to jump to conclusions. The man agrees. He asks what they should do with Eric. The man explains that Eric did not resist arrest and insisted on his innocence. Julius thought about it and asked if Eric was the one, Lord Fandol. He then gave orders for Edward to provide Eric with everything he needed, as he was their bait. Edward asks if Eric is really a decoy. Julius confirms, and says that they have one last step to complete in their plan. It was already night outside. Everyone was asleep in their beds, except for Luna, who had escaped from the estate. Luna was trying to escape late at night. Suddenly, she heard a voice of a man asking her where she was going so late at night. The girl turned her head and saw her sister and Raul. Sonia was asking her where she was going. Luna was surprised by the appearance of her sister and Raul. She thought that they were already asleep in their beds. Sonia says that they were not asleep. Sonia says that she noticed her sister's strange behavior. Luna was gloomy from the moment she heard the name of the Great Mage. Sonia assumed that Luna had withdrawn into herself. Luna tenses up and lowers her head. Sonia thinks that Luna wanted to deal with Julius alone. Sonia assumes that Luna got some stupid idea into her head. Suddenly, Luna takes off and runs away. Sonia and Raul try to catch up with her. Sonia asks why Luna runs away. She follows her sister and keeps trying to stop her. Luna stops near a small house. Raul and Sonia catch up with Luna. Raul says that Luna has very little stamina. Luna looks up and tells him that she only met Julius once, at her gift ceremony. The girl remembers the priest who told her that she had the gift of the sage. At that moment, she was happy. All the people around began to scream with delight. Luna also remembers Julius appearing behind her. Her eyes widened in surprise. At that moment, the man introduced himself and said his name. All the people immediately recognized the great sage. Julius told the girl that she had a great talent hidden within her. The girl looked at the man and waited for him to continue his speech. Julius offered to join him. He promised to give her everything she wanted. At the moment, Luna has decided to go to the capital. She believes that this is the only way she can save her father. Sonia asks what this means. She wonders if Luna really thinks that her father will be happy about such a rescue. Luna lowers her head and says that she can help. That is why she asks Raul and Sonia not to interfere with her. Luna suddenly uses her magic, namely the spell Ball Lightning. Sonia realized that the girl had shot a ball lightning straight into the ground to blind them. Sonia shouts at Raul to do something. The guy at this moment finds himself near the moon. He was standing in a fighting stance. Raul immediately realized that the girl had decided to deprive them of their sight, but he could still hear her steps. Luna apologized to Dork. She promised him to help fix everything when she returned. Raul did not understand what the girl was talking about. The moon turns around the next second and kicks the house. The house collapses. The guy is covered in bricks and falls to the ground, completely defeated. Luna runs away to the capital. Her sister turns to Raul and says that Luna knew that the house had a weak roof. Raul raises his hand, realizing that the girl knows the area, so she had an advantage. Luna looked at the gate and planned to cross it to go beyond their lands. Suddenly, the girl saw a bag of seeds flying straight towards her. It was the seed of the heavenly tree. The seeds scattered and trees appeared in front of the girl. Luna turned around and saw Raul. Sonia also managed to run up and told her that the girl had nowhere to run as they were surrounded by trees. Sonia asked Luna to just give up. She says they have to wait for Alma to return. Luna remembers something very important and hangs her head. She says that they really will have to wait for Alma. Sonia asks what this all means. Luna says that she will have to thank Alma. Luna turns to her sister and tells her that she is leaving the village to her. Luna uses the teleporter and disappears. Sonia immediately understands that the girl has once again used her magical abilities. She remembers that during Alma's lessons, Luna could barely move a few centimeters. Raul says that Luna is a genius. Sonia looks at Raul angrily. The guy turns his head away and asks what they will do. He says that it is dark in the forest, so going to look in the forest is not an option. Sonia lowers her head and says that her sister has not changed at all over time. Raul asks what Sonia means. The girl raises her head and says that if Luna decides something, she will stand to the end, never listening to anyone. Sonia remembers that Luna said that they can trust Mr. Alma. She scolded her sister. At this point, Edward was still in the same office with Julius. They were discussing a plan of action. Julius picks up the magic stone and asks the name of the guy who helped the settlement. Edward asks if the man is speaking of the boy who shared various rare artifacts with the Border Lord. He then recalls the name and says that the boy's name was Alma. He also gives his last name. In the morning, Alma found Fenrir. She was standing on the edge of a cliff. The guy said that the wolf was still hiding her presence well. He had been looking for her for a long time. Fenrir turns around and says that the guy rarely visits her. Alma agrees with her and says that he has come up with a way for the she-wolf to repay him. Fenrir looks at Alma with interest and waits for him to say more. Alma smiles and asks the she-wolf to fight him. Fenrir asked if she really had to fight. The boy said yes. He said the wolf would have to fight with all her strength. He said she would have to treat the fight as if her life was at stake. Fenrir says that he doesn't see the point in this. The boy looks at the she-wolf for a while, waiting for her to continue. Fenrir turns her head away and sighs. She doesn't deny that she owes Alma a favor, but she believes that a fight to the death is unnecessary. The she-wolf says that she has not been able to find her son since the morning. She asks the boy to come another time. Alma apologizes. Then he looks up and says he has no choice. Fenrir looks at the boy suspiciously. At that moment, a stone falls from a high mountain. The boy begins to use his magic. Fenrir asks what he is doing. She is convinced that the boy is not stupid and that he must have a reason to start a battle. She demands an answer. Alma says that Mr. Eric was taken to the capital. He remembers that the she-wolf lives next to people, therefore he assumes that she has already heard everything. Fenrir confirms his words and says that she heard that Eric was accused of gathering monsters for the rebellion. Alma lowers her head and says that it was actually his fault that he was captured. He is sure that she must somehow prove his innocence. He has been thinking for a long time about how to do this. The guy considers one option. He decides to bring a baby rare monster to the capital and give it to the king as a sign of his loyalty. The wolf tenses. She asks how the boy can take her cub. The boy spreads his arms and says he's just discussing options. He asks if that's a good reason to fight. The she-wolf says that she is too old. Alma thinks that he did not hear her well. The she-wolf repeats again and says that she is too old since she could not notice the boy's vicious heart. Fenrir suddenly disappeared. Alma tries to figure out where the wolf went. She appears behind and strikes. Dust rises, making it impossible to see anything. As the dust settles again, the wolf notices that Alma has not taken any damage from her attack. She believes that this is impossible, as she caught the boy off guard. Alma used search magic and defense magic, and as a result, was able to create a magical barrier. Then he used the highest wind magic, storm summoning. The storm left a huge trace behind. Alma understands everything. He saw that the wolf can jump in the shadows. The guy assumes that the she-wolf dodged, jumping from one shadow to another. He thought he would hit her. At this moment, the she-wolf thinks that Alma's mana level is simply incredible. Fenrir analyzes her abilities, and Alma's abilities. She realizes that she will definitely lose if she fights him directly. The wolf acknowledges the fact that the boy was a powerful mage. Alma tried to predict the wolf's next move. Fenrir used the Shadow Eater's spell, and small shadow beasts appeared from the shadows. One of the shadow beasts appeared right behind the guy. The beast tried to hit him, but nothing happened because of the barrier. Alma dodged. The guy considered it a problem that he could not guess from which shadow the beasts would attack next time. While he was distracted by the attacks of the shadow beasts, a she-wolf decided to attack him. The guy noticed that the she-wolf was more careful than he thought. She attacked only with shadows, and she herself stood aside. Alma tried to understand what the wolf was planning. The magical barrier was Alma's own invention, which he obtained through a combination of search magic and defensive magic. Alma knew that the barrier detects the enemy, calculates damage, and calculates probable attack points. This spell is incredibly complex and requires a lot of mana. Alma understood that he could not maintain the barrier permanently. His main advantage in this battle was magic, and in terms of physical strength, he was no match for the she-wolf. Alma assumed that the she-wolf was buying herself time by continuing to wear him down. He urgently needed to regain his advantage. Alma used physical strengthening magic. Then he increased physical strength, endurance, agility, and reaction speed. The wolf looked at the boy in shock. He was going to use acceleration, evasion, resistance enhancement, and durability enhancement, as well as vision enhancement and perception sensitivity. The she-wolf was amazed that the guy used several spells at once, and all of them were from the magic of physical strengthening. One of the shadow beasts ran towards Alma to attack him, but the boy was able to fight off its attack. Then the rest of the shadow beasts tried to attack him, but they failed. The guy was able to fight off each beast. Alma turned to the wolf and asked if it was time for her to join the fight. He asked her to show how serious she was. Alma asks if she had shown her full power. The she-wolf thought the guy was unusual. She didn't think he would deal with her army of shadows so easily. But Fenrir had bought enough time. Alma didn't understand what it meant. He turned around and saw that the sun was already setting below the horizon. At this moment, the she-wolf begins to grin predatorily and says that the time of her kingdom will soon begin. Fenrir, according to legends, when the end of everything comes, it is she who will devour the moon and the sun. She rules the darkness. The boy felt Fenrir approaching. Suddenly, his barrier was attacked. He was surprised because he didn't even have time to notice the attack. Alma guessed that it wasn't a matter of speed, since Fenrir moved through the shadows until she got too close. It was an attack that couldn't be dodged. That was Fenrir's unique skill, Shadow of Death. Alma ran. Fenrir shouted at him that there was no point in running. She began to catch up with the guy. Alma used light magic, blinding Fenrir. The boy used the spell, Extending Radiance. But Fenrir was not affected at all. She says that the boy's resistance is useless. Suddenly, Alma turns around and swings her hand. Fenrir doesn't understand what's happening. The boy uses the highest magic of the earth, namely the spell Volcanic Stone. Alma stands near the stone, wondering if his attack worked. At that moment, he hears the voice of Fenrir, who realized that the light was not to destroy her, but to limit her vision. Fenrir tries to attack the guy. Alma's barrier cracks. The guy covers himself with his hands and then dashes forward again. At this point, the she-wolf says that the guy is wasting his efforts. Fenrir says that, in the shadows, she can instantly move from place to place while the boy tries to attack. She asks if that makes all of Alma's efforts pointless. The boy turns around and folds his arms. He uses wind magic, the spell Air Jump. Alma rises up. The wolf looks at him angrily and says that this is very stupid. She asks if the boy really thinks that her shadows won't reach him in the air. She controls all the darkness in the world, so the boy has nowhere to run. The she-wolf says that this is the end for Alma. She's going to hit the guy until he tells her where her son is. Alma waits for a certain moment and says that something has opened. The she-wolf looks at him in amazement. She asks what it means. Alma points at Fenrir and smirks at her. If he hadn't been confident in his victory, he would never have started the fight. The wolf is blinded by the light. She doesn't understand where it came from. Alma talks about how, for several reasons, he can't drag out this fight for long. The wolf thinks this is nonsense, since the sun has long since set below the horizon. Then she notices that the sun has begun to move. The she-wolf notices something strange, namely Modoki Peak, a creature that disguises its giant body as a mountain, luring lost travelers into its mouth. Fenrir realizes that Alma simply summoned a monster disguised as a mountain. She wonders if Alma could have planned and prepared for this in advance. She begins to realize that Alma hid his emotions and lured her into the open. The wolf decided that she needed to escape. She turned around, trying to return to the shadows, but Alma stopped her, saying that the wolf could not escape in the air. The boy put his hand forward and used sealing magic. He used the spell Immobile Chains, chaining Fenrir. The boy watched as the wolf fell to the ground because she couldn't move. Fenrir has admitted her defeat. She knows she has no right to ask Alma for anything, but she still asks him to choose her over his son. Suddenly, the wolf cub's voice is heard. He admires Alma because he was able to defeat his mother, the ruler of the mountains. He waves his paw and says that the boy's strength is equal to the strength of the monster. Fenrir's eyes widen in surprise, and she asks what this all means. She sees the rest of the monsters emerge from the forest. Fenrir realized that the rest of the monsters were watching the entire battle. Alma points out that Fenrir lost, so the title of ruler of these mountains now belongs to him. The wolf asks what this means. Fenrir asks if Alma really did all this for the wolf cub. Alma tells him that he learned from the wolf cub that Fenrir is considered the mistress of the mountains. He explains the whole situation to him and asks him to hide. The wolf cub is delighted with the fight. Fenrir asks why Alma did all this. She says he could have simply used his right to request. Alma says that if he did that, he would have had to prove his authority among the monsters for a long time. Alma claims that recognition can only be gained by defeating the current ruler. He says that was the fastest way. Fenrir remembers Alma's words about taking the wolf cub to the capital as a sign of loyalty to the king. She realized that the boy was just trying to provoke her. Fenrir admits that sometimes he can't understand the boy. Alma bows before Fenrir and apologizes. He wanted to gain power to protect the territory, so he questioned the wolf's trust and feelings. Alma says he has no right to ask for forgiveness, so he decides to repay the debt properly someday. Until then, he is willing to take all of Fenrir's anger. Fenrir sighs, thinking about how difficult it is for her with Alma. She wondered what she should do with the guy. Alma looks up and asks what that means. Fenrir says that the boy just proved his strength to the monsters of the forest, so he shouldn't bow to the wolf just like that. She convinces the boy that he should serve as a role model. Alma looks at the she-wolf in amazement. Fenrir smiles, thinking that she was right about the guy after all. She proclaims Alma the Lord of the Mountains. Alma smiles, looking at the she-wolf, and thanks her. He confirms that now everything is definitely ready. The wolf turns to Alma and says she has a request. Alma asks what it is. The wolf asks the boy to give them all names. Alma asks why monsters need names. Fenrir demands that the boy give her and her son names. She says that they have become servants, so she wants a symbol to prove it. She claims that this is her request. Alma looks at the wolf with confusion at first and then smiles. He agrees, but does not promise that these names will be good. 2 days had passed since Luna had left Fandol. Alma had not yet returned, and there was no sign of the army approaching. Raul and Sonia were sitting near the gate. The boy looked at Sonia. He noticed her dejected state. Then he lowered his head, closed his eyes, and thought that he wanted Alma to come back soon. Then he hears Alma's voice, apologizing and saying that he was a little late. The boy turns around, happy to see his friend back. Then he gets scared because he sees that the guy's body was in the jaws of a she-wolf. He asked what happened. The guy assumed that the she-wolf had defeated Alma after all. Sonia looked at Alma and the she-wolf with horror. Then Alma turned his head and asked Raul and Sonia to look at him more closely. Raul and Sonia did so. They were surprised by the appearance of the other monsters. Suddenly, a wolf cub jumps out and tells about how Alma fought with his mother and won. The wolf cub says that Alma is now the ruler of these mountains and forests, and all the monsters obey him. Raul can't believe that the wolf lost to Alma. He turns to the boy and says that this all looks very strange. Suddenly, it dawns on Raul that he understood the wolf cub's speech while he was speaking. He asks how that happened. Alma explains to him that he gave a second name to the she-wolf and her son, so the telepathy became much stronger. Raul asks what kind of second name Alma gave. Alma explains that monsters with a second name are born in this world very rarely. He notes that compared to their nameless brethren, these individuals are much stronger and smarter. He explains that with the help of the naming spell, one can forcibly give a monster a second name. Raul approaches the boar and pets him. He says that if you look closely, you can see that the boars and wolves have changed somehow. Alma says that this one boar is enough to defeat the adventurer B-Rang. Raul is very scared. Alma spreads his arms wide and says that he spent all his strength to give every monster in the forest a name. The wolf points out that even Alma can run out of mana. Raul is amazed that Alma has given each monster in the forest a name. Alma says that there are 30,000 monsters in the forest. He is going to leave 564 monsters in the forest to protect the village. Alma says that since he gave all the monsters names, he can find out where they are and what is happening to them at any time and in any place. Raul was still amazed by the number of monsters in the forest. He thought that nothing could surprise him anymore. Alma then says that the only question is whether the villagers can trust the monsters. After all, it was the monsters that started all the problems. At this point, the villagers approach them and say that Alma doesn't have to worry. Alma looks at the villagers and sees that they all came with weapons and dishes on their bodies, which were supposed to act as armor. The man in front says he has been thinking about Ms. Sani's words for the past few days, specifically, that they too bear responsibility. The man turns to Mr. Alma and says that all the villagers will fight too. He claims that all the villagers will defend the lands from the royal soldiers and wait for Mr. Eric to return. Alma is pleasantly surprised by the villagers' decision. Raul puts his hands behind his head and praises the girl for her good work. He did not expect that the girl's words would have such an effect on the villagers that they would even want to fight the royal guards to protect their lands. A she-wolf appears behind Alma and says that these are good lands. The boy agrees with her. Suddenly, the man sees the she-wolf and is frightened. Fenrir asks if it is too late to be surprised by her appearance. The man was most surprised because the she-wolf spoke. Alma attracts everyone's attention and says that in any case, while he is in the capital, the territory of the settlement will be under the responsibility of Felnad. The she-wolf obeys her new master. The wolf cub, now named Fel, jumps forward, raising his paw and saying that he too has accepted the Lord's command. Alma thinks that he hasn't had to spend his entire mana supply so much in a long time. The last time was in his past life. Alma decides to check the status of his skills. He opens the system and notices that his mana reserve is at 0. He still remembers his stats from his past life. He didn't level up that much towards the end of his life. The guy could even recite his skill level by heart. Alma notices something strange about one of the skill indicators. He wonders what it means. He sees that one of the skills has dropped to level 1, but all the other indicators are exactly as he remembers them. Only one skill dropped to level 1. The guy suggests that the level is not just an indicator of leveling progress. The skill, Rebirth, allowed him to obtain his memories. The skills from his past life were obtained upon reaching adulthood. Alma wonders if the progress indicator is being carried over. He understands that it is just a theory, but it is still possible. Alma looks at his hands and realizes that he can become stronger, but there is no particular need for it yet. At this time, in the kingdom of Famiria, in the capital of Wilhelm, a huge number of warriors gathered at the training ground of the castle. Edward looked at all the warriors and was pleasantly surprised. He asks if there are too many people to suppress one small territory. Edward addressed the general, whose name was Achilles. Achilles chuckles and says that his subordinate is like his prime minister. He loves to joke. Achilles says that the warriors mainly act as porters. He explains that someone needs to carry the alcohol, money, and everything else to the capital. The man convinces Edward that no matter what the territory, even if there were 10,000 soldiers to suppress it, Achilles would be enough to conquer it. Edward looks at the man and realizes that these are not empty words, as Achilles was the god of war. He was the general responsible for all military operations of the kingdom. Edward also heard that just the other day, Achilles had single-handedly subdued the rebellious territory, destroying its army. But there were also some not-so-good rumors about him. Edward turns to the man again and says that, in any case, he came to the training ground to convey the words of Lord Julius. His master asked that Achilles postpone the march to Fandol for a while. Achilles gets angry and says that Julius also makes a great joke. He refuses. The man says that preparations for sending troops have been completed long ago. Suddenly, a crack appears in the wall, where Achilles and Edward were standing. Then the wall completely collapses. Edward noticed that the enemy had breached the outer wall. Achilles looked at the new arrivals and asked who they were. A girl stepped forward and said that her name was Luna. She said that she had come from Fandol to meet the great sage Julius. Then she looked at Achilles and asked where Julius was. Luna asks what kind of letter of recommendation she must show. The knights answer that the great sage can only be met by appointment or by presenting a letter of recommendation. Luna doesn't know what to say. The knights say that everything is clear to them. They assume that Luna is one of Julius's fans. The girl decided that she would have to go another way. That's why she destroyed the wall and went that way. The knights looked at the girl and wondered who she was. They wondered why she needed the great sage Julius. Luna puts her hands forward and demands that all the knights step aside if they want to live. The girl used the highest wind magic, Storm. Many of the knights rose up due to the girl's magical attack. The rest began to attack her. The girl used her magic powers again, and the knights lost sight of her. They tried to figure out where she could have gone. At this time, Luna appeared behind the knights and attacked them. Achilles laughs and says that Luna is a smart spy. He asks Edward if he wants to watch. The man turned around because he heard one of the knights calling him. A fireball was flying straight at him. Luna thought she had missed and then wondered what had happened to the casualties. Her eyes widened in surprise as she saw the general, who had deflected her attack with a smile on his face. The girl was amazed that the man had parried her attack with his own hands. Achilles stepped forward and demanded that all his knights disperse. The girl noticed that he was on a completely different level. She felt the pressure that came from the man, as if there was a great sage in front of her, but she understands that everything was much worse. The man sighs, looking at the girl. He asks her to leave as quickly as possible, otherwise he will not spare her. Achilles thought he could dispel boredom. Someone distracts him, and the girl at that moment feels that it has become easier for her to breathe. One of the knights says that Luna may be a child, but she destroyed an entire wall. He says that in that case the knights should deal with her themselves, since he does not fight children. He was also in a bad mood. The man turns around because he hears the girl's voice. She has already decided everything. No matter how strong her enemy is, she will defeat him because she needs to see the great sage and save her father. The girl apologizes and attacks Achilles again. The man asks why the girl only talks about Julius. Achilles noticed that the girl activated magic without casting a spell. He decides that he should be more careful. Luna noticed that her magical attacks do not cause damage to the man. She does not know what her opponent is capable of, so she decides to keep her distance. Luna uses wind magic, the spell Wind Cutter. The man smiles. He didn't believe the girl would be a worthy opponent. He says that since the girl wants to fight, he will fight her. The man throws a boulder in her direction. The girl closes her eyes and moves to another place. The man notices this and finds it unusual. The girl's eyes widened as a huge number of boulders flew at her. She dodged and tried to keep her distance, but Achilles caught up with her, smiling. She understood that the man clearly read her movements. With each throw, she was getting closer to defeat. One of the stones almost damaged the girl, but she used water magic and created a water shield. Then she used water magic, the spell Waterfall. All the knights were flooded. The girl thought that, no matter how strong Achilles was, he would not be able to overcome the water, as it would simply wash him away. Luna's eyes widen in surprise as she sees the man reflecting the flow of water with the wind current. Achilles throws the column straight at the wall. He approaches the wall and asks if the girl really thought she could hide in it. He points the girl to the front door and asks her to run away. He gives her a chance to escape. The girl wondered what Achilles' gift was. She guessed it was physical strength. The girl moves her hand to the side and says that she brought the man to this place on purpose. Suddenly, the palace gates fall on the man. Everyone looks at him and Luna in shock. She did it on purpose. The man guessed that the girl could not only teleport, but also move objects. Luna walked up to the man and asked again where Julius was. Achilles smiled widely. Luna stands in front of Achilles and asks him where Julius is. Achilles was very angry. The veins on his face bulged. He did not understand why the girl was behaving so impudently. The man says that the girl is so young, but knows a huge number of spells. He says that Luna is lucky with her gift. The man can't stand people like her. The man asks if the girl is really eager to meet the great sage. He does not understand why the girl was not afraid to go to Julius. Luna says she wants to make a deal with Julius. He is going to exchange his life for his father's. She is determined to fight for her loved ones in Fandol. Achilles asks who her father is. At first he did not understand, but then he guessed that Luna's father Eric is the ruler of Fandol. The man remembers what Edward told him about Fandol. Achilles bows his head and says that he understands everything. Now the man understands why Julius asked to postpone the campaign. The man understood that Julius is ready to do anything to become stronger. Achilles says he should try something different. The girl's eyes widen in surprise as she notices the changes in Achilles' body. She realizes that he is not using a spell. The man destroys the door that was pinning him down. He smiles and says that if he gets rid of the mysterious intruder, everything will be resolved very quickly. Achilles smashes the door to pieces and frees himself completely. Luna looked at Achilles in shock. The door was made of pure steel, so the girl does not understand how this is possible. She assumed that the doors would be able to hold a man. Edward turns around and looks at Achilles, the god of war. He knows that the man has received the gift of Berserker. Mana cannot leave his body. But in return, it constantly strengthens his muscles and bones, making him many times stronger. Almost all of Achilles' relatives are magicians, and he, as someone incapable of using magic, was considered an outcast. But still, his amazing physical indicators allowed him to succeed in another field. At the moment, he is considered one of the strongest masters of martial arts. Edward wondered if Achilles would make it in time. The man at this time got into a fighting stance and began to prepare for an attack. He was determined. Luna immediately realized that she would need to keep her distance. She teleported a huge distance away so that the man could not strike her. The man realized that Luna had used teleportation. He jumped up and disappeared. Luna looked at the place where the man stood in shock. The knights were also surprised by the disappearance of the man. They thought that Achilles had also teleported. Luna did not believe such a thing. She saw a huge mark on the ground, by which she determined that the man had simply jumped with all his might, but she could not understand where exactly the man had disappeared to. The next second, Achilles appeared behind Luna. He swung and was ready to attack. The girl at that moment thought about what she should do, bend, teleport, but she understood that she would not have time to do any of this. Her mana was already at its limit. The man strikes, but misses the moon, as it has disappeared somewhere. The man looked at the place where the girl was in amazement. He assumes that she teleported again. The man turns his head and sees that Julius has appeared, holding the girl in his arms. It was he who saved her. He managed to grab her and move with her to a safe distance. The girl tried to say something, but she could not. She was amazed that the great sage Julius saved her. Julius let the girl go. Julius says he has received a message from Sir Edward. He feels that Achilles has been inhospitable to the girl. He says that Achilles is behaving terribly. He was very displeased. Achilles smirks and says that the moon has broken down their defensive walls. Julius says that Achilles himself and his accuracy are to blame for most of the injuries. The man did not think about accuracy during the fight. Julius says that he will pay for all the repairs to the walls and other damage anyway. He convinces everyone that what happened will be remembered as a training accident. He demands that the injured soldiers be sent to him later. Julius is asked if there will be any further claims against him. Achilles glares at the man, then turns around and says he has no complaints. He's just leaving. Luna watched the man go. Then Julius turned to her and asked her to follow him so they could talk in private. They went into the office together. Julius asks if all the girl really wants is Lord Eric's release and restoration of his rights as ruler of Fandol. He thinks about it and chuckles. Luna looked at the man at this time and remembered that the great sage Julius is known as the strongest magician in the kingdom and a cold-blooded prime minister. She wonders what he will make her do. The girl clenches her hands tightly into fists. She has already decided that she will save her father, so she is ready to do anything, even if she has to do something illegal. Julius asks if the girl really thinks he is so terrible. Luna wonders if she could have said something out loud. She suddenly covers her mouth with her hand. Julius asks the girl not to be so scared. He says that his conditions will be beneficial for her. As the man already said, he is not interested in the moon. The girl looks at him in surprise. Julius says he is interested in Luna's talent. The girl's eyes widen. She asks why a man needs her talent. Julius decides to tell about his demands. The girl opens her mouth in surprise when she hears what the man demands. Achilles asks what Julius just said. The man says that Luna will become his wife. The man says he is calling off the military campaign against Fandol and sending Lord Eric back. He says that Lord Eric will rule the lands as a close bloodline to the king. Achilles says that is not what he asked about. The man repeats again that they will become husband and wife. Achilles assumes that Julius is just joking, but the man looks back seriously. Luna just lowers her gaze and remains silent. Luna was scared when she heard that Julius was going to take her as his wife. She imagines her sister scolding her for associating with such people and not being careful in the city. The man says that Luna is mistaken. He repeats once again that he is only interested in the girl's strength, not in her. He explains the marriage by saying that he needs to keep the girl's talent at hand. Luna asks if this is really why Julius decided to capture her father and keep all of Fandol in fear. She wonders why a man would go to such lengths to gain such immense power. Julius looks at the girl in silence. He does not answer the girl's call and informs her that the wedding ceremony will take place in a day. He says that it is already late, so he advises the girl to go to her room. He asks her to follow him. Luna is certain that the great sage Julius's goal is the very power she used when she met Fenrir. Edward noticed the girl's frown. He said there was no point in being so angry. He understood that a girl like Luna would be uncomfortable with the idea of an arranged marriage, but he assured her that such things were common among aristocrats. Edward said the girl was lucky. She asked what that meant. The man explains that by becoming the prime minister's wife, her status will be a cut above that of other aristocrats. She will have a distinct advantage. The man says that Luna will be able to enjoy all the amenities of the royal palace, luxurious public baths, blooming gardens, and the royal library, which contains all kinds of books. Luna immediately became alarmed when she heard about the books about mania. She could not contain her emotions. The man immediately noticed the girl's delight. Edward confirms that there is a huge library in their castle. The girl is silent for a while due to shock, and then, screaming, asks how a man can be over 60 years old if he looks about her age. He also adds that Mr. Julius is handsome despite being 60 years old. Edward says that he roughly calculated. He tells how, when he was much younger, he came to the palace as a much more adventurous man, and the great sage Julius was already the prime minister. Luna is surprised by Edward's words and looks at him with wide eyes. The man notices this. He smiles and asks why the girl is looking at him so strangely. He was obsessed with power. Edward answers that he does not know the true intentions of Mr. Julius. He tells about how he once caught the man looking at a photograph. Then he told about how he made a promise to someone. Achilles raises his voice and asks Julius not to say such things. He reports that the soldiers are ready for battle. He thinks that they have already delayed the campaign for too long. He does not like the fact that Julius is going to change everything by marrying a girl. Achilles asks if Julius has any idea how much trouble he causes for the people around him. The great sage says that the level of benefit of this marriage for the state exceeds all the inconveniences. Achilles asks if this is really so. He says that to him, it all seems like the delirium of an old man who has become bored in his old age. Achilles did not take Julius seriously. Julius says more seriously that everything has already been decided. He announces that the ceremony will take place in a few hours. He hands the man an envelope and says he wants to see his participation. Luna looked at Achilles with a printed expression. Achilles was very angry. The veins on his face bulged again. Edward comes closer to his master and says that this was not the right moment. Luna looks at Achilles in amazement as horns begin to appear. He chuckled and said that only Julius could do something like that. Julius begins to explain that Achilles has the gift of Berserker, which concentrates mana inside the body. He says that this gives the man unprecedented strength, but he still has weaknesses. He adds that Achilles is emotionally unstable and his mana levels are off the charts. The man explains that normal people have excess mana leaving their bodies, but Achilles is unable to do so. The result is his explosive nature. The god of war is currently out of control. Achilles looks up and says he hears a voice. Suddenly, he hits the column next to him with his hand. It collapses in a second. Luna and Edward are alarmed. Achilles continues to scream. He says that the voice in his head is telling him to fight someone to get out all his anger. The man jumps up and swings his fist, speaking negatively about Julius. Julius moves to fight back. Edward says that things are pretty bad. He can't imagine how a fight between a great sage and a martial artist would end. He thinks the consequences would be simply terrible. Luna wonders if she should save Mr. Julius. She remembers that Julius saved her. She also realizes that without Julius, their deal will not work. Julius says everything is under control. He folds his arms and asks Luna not to interfere. The man looks menacingly at Achilles. He is about to use a special magic of the environment. There is a bright flash. Luna and Edward try to cover themselves with their hands. Luna heard someone screaming and wondered who could be screaming. She hears voices trying to understand what happened and where the new participant in the conflict came from. At this moment, Luna feels helplessness, which seems somehow familiar to her. Luna recognizes Alma's voice, who is glad that he is familiar with the girl's mana. Otherwise, he would not have been able to teleport directly to the palace. Alma and Raul appear right in front of Achilles, who hits the barrier with his hand. The guy says that the situation in the palace is unsettled. Luna is happy about Alma's appearance, and Achilles clenches his jaw. Alma turns around and greets the girl. He thinks he should say that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The girl blushes, and Julius looks menacingly at Alma. Alma stood right in front of Julius. He protected himself with a barrier, which prevented Achilles from striking the great sage. Achilles wondered how Alma had gotten into the palace. He assumed the boy had teleported, but then he remembered that their castle was surrounded by a barrier. Achilles decided that none of that mattered. The man decided that Alma would still be his prey. Alma turns around and sees Achilles looking at him with great animosity. He then turns his head to Luna and says that he's glad to see her safe and sound. He had heard so many stories that he thought something terrible might have happened to her. Achilles jumps up and swings his arm to hit the guy. The guy doesn't have time to react, but the barrier protects him. Luna shouts for Alma to see the attack. The guy noticed that Achilles had terrifying strength. Luna looked at the boy excitedly. She called his name and Julius heard it. He realized that this was the mysterious guy that Edward had told him about. Julius watches the boy and notices that he does not respond to Achilles' attacks, but only defends himself from them. He has never seen such a spell. Alma's barrier was able to reflect even a sudden attack. He realized that the barrier automatically blocks any attacks. Achilles smiles predatorily and asks Alma what he is going to do if a man knocks the ground out from under his feet. The man hits the ground with his hand and it cracks. Alma realizes that Achilles tried to destroy the support. Achilles says that if the guy's magic didn't block everything, he wouldn't even be able to breathe. The man understands that this means that the barrier only reacts to impact impulses. Achilles assumes that if he moves carefully and slowly, he can reach Alma. As the man moves to grab Alma, his eyes widen in surprise as Alma manages to move away. The man hisses. He is angry that Alma managed to dodge and hurt him. Luna noticed that Achilles' horns were missing. Julius, watching the battle, realized that the automatic counterattack had reacted to the man. He turns to Achilles. The man turns to him and asks what Julius wants to say. The Great Magician asks if the man could calm down. Achilles smiles widely. He shouts that he will not be able to calm down because even his hands have started smoking. Julius asks if Achilles can read the atmosphere. Achilles says that Julius himself started the battle. Moreover, he did not like the illegal entry into the palace. Julius lowers his head and says that Alma is one of the guests. Achilles says that the man is talking nonsense again. He assumes that the man has a safe word for every occasion in life. Achilles becomes even more angry and decides to leave. Achilles clicks his tongue. A knight approaches him and asks if he is okay. He tries to explain to the general what the withdrawal of the army will mean. He rubs the back of his head with his hand and says that one monster is okay, but he can't fight two monsters at once. The knight asks what that means. Achilles felt a chilling feeling coming from Alma, as if Julius had split in two before his eyes. He holds his hand and decides that he will fight Alma later. Julius approaches Alma and asks if he and Luna are really friends. He apologizes for the rude reception. And then he introduces himself, stating his name. He says that he is known in the kingdom as a great sage. Alma understands everything. He sees Julius for the first time, about whom he has heard many different things. He did not think that he would not be as creepy as he imagined. Julius asks why Alma came to the kingdom. Alma bows and says that he has come to speak with the great sage Julius as a representative of Fandol's interests. He too apologizes for coming uninvited with Raul. Alma had thought that they were ready for battle, but he has decided that it is best to resolve the matter through dialogue. He is glad that he was taught the basics of negotiation in the pharaoh's household. Julius asks if the boy has anything he wants to say. Alma says that Lord Eric was wrongly accused of organizing the rebellion. Alma tries to convince the man that neither the Lord nor his people have any ill will towards the kingdom. As proof, he wants to give one of the artifacts belonging to Fandol. In fact, Alma simply brought the artifact from his vault. Julius says that there is no need for that. The boy's eyes widen in surprise. The man comes closer and says that Alma's offer is tempting, but he has already come to an agreement with Luna. Julius reports that Luna has agreed to marry him. Raul and Alma are shocked by this news. Luna is embarrassed and looks away. Edward was in Eric's room. He announced that one of the most influential people in this kingdom would become his son-in-law. He claims that from now on, neither Fandol nor his family will want for anything. The man began to cry, realizing what his daughter had to do. Raul got up from the floor and raised his fist. He was screaming that Julius had simply exchanged one hostage for another. He was saying that this marriage could not be considered legal. Julius looked at the boy angrily. Raul got scared and hid behind Alma's back. Julius says that marriages of convenience are not uncommon. He is sure that as long as both parties agree, it is a very normal marriage. In his opinion, everything is within the limits of what is established by the kingdom. Julius turns to the girl and asks if he is right. Luna is not sure. She tries to say something. But then he looks at Alma and falls silent. Alma waits for Luna's answer. The girl lowers her head. She turns to Alma and Raul, thanking them for coming to this place for her. She convinces them that she is fine. Luna says that by marrying a great sage, she will be able to protect their lands, and also by receiving the support of the kingdom, they will be able to develop the lands of Fandol faster. She thinks that in this case, everyone will be able to smile and be happy. At this moment, the girl wonders why Alma came to save her. They have not known each other for long. She wonders why. Looking at Alma, she feels her heart overwhelmed with pain. Luna lowers her head again and says that as long as her loved ones are happy, she is happy. She wanted to say something else, but fell silent. Alma called out to Luna to continue, but Julius shielded her with his cloak. Julius took the girl away and said that the ceremony would take place the following day. He said that as friends of the bride, Alma and the all could also take part. He ordered the servants to take Raul and Alma to the guest room. Julius turns to Luna. He assumes that the girl is tired, so he says that she should rest. They leave. Alma only watches them go. A few hours later, Luna was sitting on her bed in her room, looking at the wedding dress that stood right in front of her. The girl thought about her words about being happy when her relatives are happy. She decides that this is her heart's desire. The girl wonders why she began to hesitate in that case. The girl was thinking about her feelings for Alma. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the window. She turned around and saw Alma. The girl was very surprised by his appearance. Raul and proceeded to the guest room. Raul was pleasantly surprised by the luxurious furnishings. He thought that everything was furnished in the spirit of a royal palace. He says that even the most luxurious hotels are not furnished like this. He turns to Alma and asks if he is right. Alma doesn't really react, but still agrees. Raul suddenly hears a knock on the door and goes to check who decided to show up. The boy saw Edward. The man said that he wanted to discuss something with the adventurers alone. Alma came to Luna's room. The girl asked what he was doing in her room. Alma replied that he came to her to ask her personally if everything was really okay with her. He waited for the girl's answer. Luna says that everything has already been decided. She is sure that there is no other way to protect her father, the territory, and the people. Alma interrupts the girl and asks if she really thinks that there is no other way to protect the state. He hands some object to the girl. Luna realizes that it is a glove. She asks why she needs a glove. Alma tells about Sir Edward coming to him and offering something. The guy remembers that the man came into their room and offered to have a duel. He told about the tradition in the kingdom. If a person appears who has objections to the marriage, he can publicly announce it and challenge one of the parties to a duel. Edward explained that the newlyweds have every right to refuse the challenge, but if they are talking about a great sage, then he will definitely agree to a duel. The man said that the main thing is that the loser is obliged to fulfill any demands of the winner. Luna asks if this means that if Alma wins, Julius will be obliged to listen to him. Alma confirms her assumption. Alma is almost 90% sure that this is a trap. He knew that the glove contained a form of oath. He thinks that Edward and Julius prepared thoroughly. It seems to him that Julius planned to have a duel from the very beginning. That is why the man refused Alma's offer. The guy understood that the great sage Julius should not be underestimated. The girl lowered her head, thinking that if Julius won, they would definitely not be able to save the lands of Fandol. But she also understood that Julius's power was limitless, so Alma could be forced to do something if she lost. Alma asked the girl what she thought about all this. She raises her head and looks questioningly at the guy. Alma says that he has thought about several possible scenarios. He mentions that the girl is happy as long as her loved ones are happy. He says that neither her friends nor her relatives will be happy as long as she is unhappy. The same goes for Alma. He wants to see the girl smile. Alma says that if Luna is really happy with everything, he will simply forget about the glove and go his own way. Then he says that if the girl is unhappy, he will immediately offer her his hand and agree to a duel. The boy extends his hand and promises to defeat Julius. The girl looks at Alma with embarrassment. Alma wants Luna to believe in him and tell him what she really wants. The girl lowers her head and tries to say something, but she can't because of the emotions that have washed over her. A few seconds later, the girl apologizes. The guy tries to support her, but the girl does not let him say anything and tells him that last time she left without waiting for Alma to return. She refused to believe that the guy would be able to find a solution. Luna knows that this may sound selfish, but seeing the guy's face again made her realize that what she really wants is to be with Alma and her loved ones. She wants them all to return to their lands together. She wants to believe in Alma. The girl starts to cry. Alma hugs her and smiles. He calms the girl down, promising that everything will be okay. He heard the girl's request. The boy was happy that Luna had finally gathered the courage to take a risk and believe in him. Now it was his turn to justify her faith. Alma swears that she will definitely make Luna happy. The girl looks at the guy in bewilderment, and then blushes very much from embarrassment. She says that it sounded very ambiguous. All this time, Achilles, who was sitting on the roof, was listening to them. He grinned at everything he saw. He wondered why Alma was walking around the palace, but now everything became clear to him. Achilles became interested in the topic of the duel. He thought about participating too. He thinks that it will be a lot of fun, because it has never happened before that 3 people fought in a duel at once. Achilles thinks that the most important thing is that Julius and Alma do not conspire against him. Then everything will be perfect. The man was thinking about something else, but his thoughts were interrupted by a voice in his head. The man smiles, remembers something important, and says that he has already come up with a plan. Achilles chuckles and can't wait to scream his heart out. He jumps off the roof and walks away. Luna notices that the boy turned around with a wary look. She asked what was going on with the boy. Alma replied that everything was fine. He knew that Achilles was watching them, so he immediately felt that he was gone. Alma smiles, so she doesn't think it will be easy. Alma looks out the window while Luna stands behind and doesn't understand what's going on. He decides that, in that case, he too should prepare for the battle that will take place in a day. Alma stood in the palace corridor and constantly looked around, as he wanted to check if anyone was following him. The guy puts his hands on the wall in front of him trying to find a secret passage. He was sure that it was somewhere in this place. The guy presses on one of the bricks and finds the right one. The guy's eyes widen in surprise. A passage opens right in front of them. He smiles and walks inside. The passage is closed. As Alma walked along the secret corridor, he remembered that 200 years ago, when he came to the royal capital, he built a secret shelter in this place. The guy also thinks that at the beginning of his journey, it was precisely this secret shelter that he planned to get to. When building this shelter, Alma used spatial expansion and pocket space magic, so from this shelter one could quickly reach any place in the kingdom. The guy analyzed his dialogue with Luna. He remembers that the girl told him about Julius's promise. He was interested in what kind of promise the man had given. Luna told him that Julius was building up his strength to fulfill a promise he made to the man in the photograph he was looking at. The boy thought about the photograph. Luna asked if this information would help the boy. Alma confirmed her words and said that if they wanted to defeat Julius, he would first need to study him. Luna smiled and said that he was relying on the boy. Alma continued walking down the secret corridor and thought about the reason Julius wanted power was because of a promise. He tried to figure out what his promise was. He guessed he could figure something out if he looked at the photo. Alma can help Julius fulfill his promise. The guy assumes that in this case, everything will be resolved peacefully. He also considers one of the options, to take the person from the photo hostage. The last option is not the best, but he has already sworn to the moon, so he will use any possible means. The guy comes to the right room and smiles. As he walks in, he spots one of his old pieces and thinks about what happens when you create new rooms on a whim. In his previous life, efficiency was his top priority, not room design. Alma comes up and starts examining the thing. He puts his hand on it and notices that it is even better preserved than he thought. The guy looks at the huge golem that sits in front of him. It seemed to him that after 200 years of oblivion, he would be completely covered in dust. The guy looks around and thinks that he hasn't been in this place for a very long time. It was a homemade butler golem. 200 years ago, in this world where all of Alma's friends had already died, this artificial face made the boy feel nostalgic. The boy strokes the golem and says that they haven't seen each other for 200 years. He thanks the creature for watching over the place while Alma was away. Suddenly, the golem starts moving. It thinks Alma is an intruder, so it announces that it is going into attack mode. Alma didn't understand why the golem didn't recognize him. The golem tried to hit Alma, but he managed to dodge. The guy was stunned by the golem's behavior. He assumed that the golem did not recognize him because the guy was reborn. Alma understands that the golem's database contains the biometrics of his body from his past life. The indicators registered in his database can easily enter and exit. The golem then begins to emit smoke. If Alma remembers correctly, his smokescreen causes 3 debuffs at once: paralysis, poisoning, and hallucinations. Alma's auto barrier can't block the poisonous mists. Alma decides to use the increased poison resistance buff magic. At that moment, he remembered that he had built 8 sensors into the golem: a mana sensor, a thermal sensor, an optical sensor, and a huge number of other sensors. Alma understood that the golem would be able to track any type of enemy even in the poisonous fog. The golem also individually adjusted its algorithm of actions for each enemy. Inexperienced opponents would quickly be defeated due to its strong attacks. Alma dodges the golem's attack and ends up behind it. He notices that the golem used concentrated acid, which corroded the wall. Alma remembers that the acid was made of high-quality materials. The boy wondered what he should do now. He knew that he could easily break the golem, but suddenly the boy remembered his past life and how he assembled the golem. Alma wondered where the golem had gone. Suddenly, a creature appeared behind him and attacked. The guy doesn't have time to react. He screams. The golem believes that he has dealt with the intruder, so he turns off the attack mode. But now Alma appears behind him and sighs. He says that he did everything very quickly, but still managed to create one clone for each species from all the golem's sensors. The guy touches the golem with his hand and makes the biometric adjustment. He sighs in relief again as he was able to complete the update. The golem starts to get nervous. At this point, Alma turns around and asks him not to worry. He takes all the blame on himself for not having foreseen this in his past life. Alma turns around and looks at the golem. He hopes that the golem will continue to watch over the shelter as diligently as before. The creature looks at the boy happily. Alma would like to show the golem to Raul or Luna. The boy felt nostalgic again. He remembers that during the test run the golem also failed. Then he was helped by a child who secretly spied on the process. Alma remembered a black-haired child who looked somewhat like him now. The boy reaches the control room and abruptly breaks off all his memories. In this room, Alma gathered information and control. Initially, he used this room to keep an eye on the entrance and exit of the shelter. Eventually, he decided to leave his mark everywhere, eyes watching the entire kingdom. The guy sat down on a chair and started typing something on the keyboard. He was looking for Julius's room. He thought that if he couldn't find a photo from the cameras, he would have to go look for it himself. The boy finally found Julius's room. But Julius himself was not visible on the cameras. He could not find the photo. Alma wondered where the man could have hidden the photo. He decides that he can go and look in the room while Julius is gone. The boy wondered if the man could have gone for a walk. Suddenly, Alma heard someone's footsteps. He couldn't believe that someone else knew about the secret hideout from his past life. It was Julius. He was going down to the control and observation room. Alma turned around and began to think about his options for further action. Julius walked deeper into the room. He decided to see how things were going in the castle. He approached the observation room and looked at the cameras. The man looked closely at the camera, which showed Alma and Raul's room. It seemed to him that the guests were behaving quietly. At this time, Alma was hiding behind the wall. He was glad that he heard the steps in time and hid. The eyes showed the recording to the man, but the guy was most concerned about how Julius got into the secret shelter. Alma hid all the passages with magic. He knew that a powerful magician like Julius could find them. He wondered where the man was going and why. The guy was also interested in the question of what happened to the golem that was supposed to guard this place. The golem was supposed to attack anyone who entered into the database. Alma wondered if Julius could have registered himself in the system. Then he looked at the man and realized that he was going straight to Alma's office. The guy remembers that he used to often sit in this office reading magical treatises. He assumed that the man was looking for a book that would help him in the duel. Alma remembers that he moved the most valuable books to his storage. Julius will not find anything in the office. Alma notices that Julius took a photo out of his pocket. The guy suspects that this is the same photo that Luna was talking about. Julius looks at the photo and says a name that is very familiar to Alma. Alma doesn't understand how this is possible. He spent his entire life studying magic and perfecting his skills. There were very few people who knew his real name. Julius called his former name. Alma remembers sitting in a chair in his office when a dark-haired boy named Julius, who had been attacked by a rampaging golem, came up to him. Now this boy came to him and brought him food. Alma apologized and said he had just dozed off. The boy said he would leave the food next to the master. He puts the bag of groceries on the table next to the chair. Alma, he doesn't remember, on a whim or out of boredom, began to teach Julius magic. He assumes that he was very lonely and was looking for someone to talk to. Alma pointed to the side and asked the boy to look at the golem. There was a flash. Julius screamed and asked what it was. Alma went to the golem and took out a photo. He said it was a test sample. He explained to the boy that the golem had combined an optical sensor and light magic. The man showed the photo to the boy. Julius took the photo and was delighted. He said it was as if another world had appeared. Alma explained to the boy that the creation of a photo works on the same principle as their eyes. Julius raised his head and asked if he could take the photograph with him. The man allowed him to take the photograph. But he thought it was strange because there was nothing in color in the photograph. Julius said it didn't matter. The boy held the photo in his hand and promised that he would treasure it. Julius holds the photo in his hand. Julius smiled, remembering that very moment. He noticed that the dust had reached his master's chair. Alma came out of his hiding place. He realized that the great sage Julius had cleaned the office that he used in his past life. He patted his chair sadly and reluctantly left. Alma thought that if Julius really was Julius, then that would explain the golem's inactivity. Alma guessed that Julius had made him a promise. He wondered if it was really his fault that a cruel and heartless prime minister had been born, intimidating ordinary citizens. He wondered what kind of promise Julius had made him. He couldn't remember. Alma struggled to remember what kind of promise Julius could have made. Now he only had more reasons to fight. The next morning, Luna stood outside the church in her wedding dress. She knew that this was the building where she and Julius would get married. Luna was met by Julius, who said that the girl looked great. She thanked the man and then said that there would be no wedding. The man smiled and turned around as he felt Alma appear behind him. The boy turned to the great sage and, holding out his glove, challenged him to a duel. Alma was going to make sure that Julius was indeed the same Julius. Alma pressed the glove and swore that if he lost, he would accept any demands he made. He stared into the man's eyes, thinking about what he had promised him. Alma says that if he wins, the marriage will be considered illegal and all charges against Lord Fandol will be dropped. Julius says he accepts the challenge. Alma and Julius arrived at the capital Colosseum of the Kingdom of Fenrir. It was a huge colosseum, around which stood huge statues of warriors with weapons. Alma stood opposite Julius. Between them was the priest. Everyone else stood aside and watched the duel. The common people wondered who Alma was, why he decided to fight the prime minister, and how quickly their fight would end. Raul smiled, even though he was nervous about being on enemy ground. He even had a stomachache. Luna agreed with the guy, but even so, she was sure that Alma would not lose. Luna squeezes her hand and remembers what Alma promised to win. Raul smiled and then heard the voice of a man asking the villagers to insert. He convinced the audience that if they guessed how much Alma would lose, they would receive a prize. He was sure that Alma was not long for this world. Suddenly, a bag of gold coins flew into the face of the man who was making bets. Raul had bet all his money on Alma to win. Raul chuckled and said that Alma doesn't know what it's like to lose. Luna was shocked that Raul had bet all his money. The priest attracts attention and says that it is time for them to begin the duel that will determine the fate of the married couple. The priest says that a man named Alma raised his objection to Julius and Luna. He announces the conditions of victory. It is necessary to force the enemy to admit defeat, or to bring him to a state where he can no longer fight. Whether there will be a fight to the death depends on the fighters themselves. The priest announces that if the fighters leave the arena, then this is automatically counted as a defeat. Alma looked at Julius and noticed familiar features. He couldn't believe that he was really Julius. At that moment, the priest announced that the use of weapons was prohibited, but there were still some nuances. Alma had 3 possible explanations for everything that was happening. The first explained it all by the fact that Julius really was Julius. But the question remained, how could he live for more than 200 years? The second explanation is that Julius is a skilled copy of Julius, but this is unlikely, as it would take too much time and resources to create an artificial body capable of passing through the golem's defense. It would be easier to choose another method. And the third option explains it by the fact that someone used necromancy. Alma thinks that it is quite possible that Julius's body is being manipulated with forbidden magic. As long as the necromancers have a body, the rest is not a problem. But he could not understand why, in this case, it was Julius's body that was needed. Alma assumes that the necromancer wanted to get into his secret refuge. Then Alma decides that he can't be distracted at the moment. The priest turns to Julius and asks if he swears to give up the moon and submit to Alma's terms if he is defeated. The man swears. The priest then turns to Alma and asks the exact same question. The boy looks at Julius and replies that he swears. The priest announced the start of the duel. Alma used the highest magic of fire. Julius countered him with the highest magic of water. Julius's water lance and Alma's fire lance crashed into each other. Raul, Edward, and Luna were shocked by the explosion from the spears crashing into each other. For the safety of spectators, a barrier was installed. Alma and Julius moved throughout the arena. Alma used fire magic, meteor shower, and Julius used the ultimate water magic, water storm. a huge explosion occurred again. It seemed to all the spectators that Julius and Alma were equal in strength. Some wondered if he was just imagining things. Alma understands that all of Julius's blows were testing. It seemed to him that the man did not take their battle seriously. Alma wondered if this would create additional problems for him. Julius looked at Alma. The man immediately realized that Alma was attacking him. The guy destroyed the support under the man's feet. It seemed to him that Alma was parodying Achilles' methods. But then he realized that the guy only wanted to create a smokescreen. Alma raised her fist and tried to strike. He notices the shards and his eyes widen in surprise, realizing that Julius used his ice clone. At this moment, Julius tries to strike the guy. Alma manages to dodge and jump back. Alma notices that several hairs fell from his head. Julius notices that Alma went into close combat, although he is a wizard. He sees that the guy has enough combat experience, despite the fact that he is still young. Julius uses water magic and calls Ice Sword. He jumps up and runs to attack the guy. He says that Alma is becoming more and more interesting. Alma takes a fighting stance and says that he is flattered. He uses mass body strengthening spell. A man swings a sword. The guy manages to hit him several times. The man doesn't have time to dodge, so he puts his sword forward. Alma breaks the blade of the sword. The man notices that Alma has swung again to strike. Alma strikes and sees ice shards. He realizes that it was another ice clone. The guy notices that a sword blade appeared near his throat. He understood that he was fighting a great sage, so this was expected. He says that Julius specifically used ice magic at the beginning to scatter the pieces around the arena and hide his clone. He asks if he understood everything correctly. Alma asks why he hasn't been hit yet. Julius replies that he's waiting. He asks why Alma lured him to this particular place. The guy doesn't understand what Julius is talking about. He turns around and notices that the ground under the man's feet has started to crack. A huge worm appeared near him. Julius realized that the worm was summoned using summoning magic. He defeats the underground monster with one blow. The man then turns to Alma and, smiling, says that he has been found out. The man was still standing in front of Alma. The boy wondered how Julius knew that he had summoned a monster. Julius pointed his hand towards Alma and used the highest ice magic, the Ice Lotus spell. Everything in the area froze. Raul and Luna were worried about Alma's condition. All they saw was a huge block of ice and Julius standing next to it. Julius turns around and asks if the guy really used the teleporter. Alma was right above him. Julius said that it is quite dangerous magic, but if you watch your surroundings, it ceases to be so scary. The man uses ice magic, ice spikes. Alma is looking at the man at this point. He realized that Julius had already read all of his actions. The guy decides to use the highest flame magic, the Scorching Heat spell. He added lightning magic to the flame magic. Julius pulls his hand back at this point and uses water magic. Julius uses the spell, God of Ice, and Alma uses the spell, God of Fire and Thunder. Their powers clash. Julius explains that from the moment Sir Edward said the boy's name, he felt that their meeting would end this way. He learned that Alma has been wandering from one place to another since he was cast out of the family. Alma is amazed that the man knows about this. The man recalls a huge influx of nightmares that occurred in the trading city of Taristel. He also heard that a mountain-sized monster suddenly appeared and then suddenly disappeared in the Tonat Mountains. The man says that upon investigation, both incidents were found to coincide with the boy's movements after he was banished from Firuz. Julius, using the kingdom's information network, has collected all the information about Alma and his actions. Now he can predict not only the appearance of the monster, but all the other actions of the guy. The man tries to freeze the boy. Alma jumps back and then lands and notices that his legs have started to become covered in ice. Julius continues and says that the ability to use not only high magic, but also combine them for greater effect amazes him. He thinks that Alma is very talented. But Julius knew that both types of magic require time to accumulate mana. He says that such attacks are not difficult to counter if you know the time frame. The man also says that if Alma's barrier can prevent his ice attacks, it cannot affect the spread of ice air. The man asks if he is right. Alma shakes the ice off her boots. He thinks that Julius is very smart. Julius flies up and says that it is time to end the fight. He uses a special ice magic, the spell Iceberg. Alma understood that Julius agreed to the battle being completely confident in his victory. Julius asks what's going on. He says it's time for Alma to show him what else Alma is hiding. He wants to see if the boy can give in before the ice block crushes him. Raul screams at the sight of the ice block. He thinks it's very scary. He says that Alma, in such a small arena, won't be able to dodge if that attack hits him. Alma stands right under the ice block. He thinks that he will only need one chance at success. He tried to think of something. Suddenly, Julius shouts to Alma that he too can become his power. The boy wonders what this means. As Julius said earlier, he knows Alma's story. He assumes that being thrown out of the family upset the boy greatly. He assumes that Alma came to the West to gain strength and take revenge. He is satisfied with this option. Julius is unaware of the nature of Alma's techniques. He does not want to lose such a talent. He asks the boy to accept defeat and bow before him. He convinces Alma that if he becomes his right hand, he will be the second most powerful in this kingdom. Raul and Luna looked at the boy with concern. Julius waited for Alma's answer. The boy bowed his head, thinking that people who knew about his adventures in the East might decide that he was desperate, but that was not the case at all. Alma looks up and says that she appreciates Julius's offer, but he ultimately declines, as he is more than happy with the current situation. Alma has no desire to accept Julius's offer. The only things that matter to him are the trips with Luna and Raul, and the days spent in Fandol. Luna was happy with Alma's decision. Julius was annoyed. Alma turns to the great sage and says that he has remembered something. He says that it is a spell that Julius has not seen yet. He leans over and adds that Julius knows something about this spell. Julius is confused. Alma holds out his hand, and the vault materializes in his hand. Julius looks at the guy suspiciously. All the spectators tried to figure out what kind of box the guy pulled out. Julius realizes that this is a vault. He has been told of such magic. He assumes that Alma is going to get something like an ancient weapon. He recalls that the rules of the duel do not prohibit the use of weapons as long as they are enchanted. Julius thinks this is something he can handle for now. He says it looks interesting. The man says the guy can get any weapon he wants, but it won't help stop him. Alma is going to do something with this magic. He summons a golem. Julius looks at the guy, dumbfounded. At this moment, the golem swings and strikes straight at Julius's ice block. The man manages to dodge. Julius wondered what the golem was doing in the arena. Most of all, he was interested in the question of where Alma got the golem from. He assumed that the guy had snuck into the secret room and stolen it. But the most problematic thing for the man was that he could not destroy the golem. As the golem raised its arm to attack, Julius shouted at the creature to stop. He tried to convince it that they were not enemies. The golem stopped, as its target had been identified. It stopped attacking. Julius looked at the golem grimly. Suddenly, Alma appears behind Julius. He says that the man has opened up. Julius turns around. At that moment, Alma touches him. He uses the spell, Light of Purification. Julius tries to cover his eyes from the bright light. Raul asked what was happening. He couldn't see anything because of the bright flash. Suddenly, Julius's mask falls to the ground. Everyone sees his displeased face. The man asks why Alma used the spell, Purifying Light. He says that if Alma used defensive magic, he would have definitely hit. He wondered why Alma used magic that removed negative statuses. Alma replies that he wanted to make sure that Julius really controls his own body. The man does not understand what is being discussed. Alma asks if the man really hasn't figured it out yet. He asks Julius to tell him who he thinks the guy really is. The man's eyes widen in surprise. Julius asks what Alma just said. He wonders how the boy knew his real name. Alma asks if the man really hasn't understood anything yet. Julius looks at him in shock. Julius sighed. He says that everything is clear to him now. He says that he understood how Alma knew his old name. He was sure that Alma stole all the powers and the ability to control the golem. He says the boy even stole his master's books, magic, and research. Alma wonders why he failed. Even in his past life, he had never met a Reincarnator. It was such a rare gift. Besides, who would believe that a Reincarnator would talk so calmly about his past life? He wonders how to prove it to him. Julius clenches his fist. He had been searching for his master's whereabouts for 200 years. So much had he yearned for this meeting. He gets angry and says that this is unforgivable. He thinks that of all the names, Alma decided to take the name of his master. Alma just looks at Julius. The golem approached Luna and Raul. Raul could not understand what Alma and Julius were talking about. He did not hear anything. The great sage seemed sad to Luna. Alma asks why Julius became so attached to her master. He asks if there was some magic or thing he wanted very much. He wondered why people were so fixated on a man who had been dead for 200 years. Julius demanded that Alma shut up. He convinces Alma that his master is alive because he made a promise. The boy wonders what that promise was. Julius talks about what happened that day. Then he was able to use ice magic and create a snowflake. The master then praised the boy and said that he had a predisposition to ice magic. He said that the boy would have to study mainly only that. The man noticed the strange expression on the boy's face. He asked what happened. Julius raised his head and, smiling, said that he wanted to study the magic that the master had once shown him. The man thought about it. He said that this magic was still in development, especially since Julius still had a low level of magic. The boy promised that he would become stronger. But then the man said that he would most likely leave this place soon. Julius looked at the man with concern. The man began to tell that he had heard interesting rumors about the Eastern contingent. He would be leaving next week. The boy was very upset. On the day of departure, Julius stood in front of the man. Julius was sad. The man noticed the child's dejected appearance and asked him to keep an eye on the room. Julius raised his head and looked at the man with interest. The man said that all the books and magical tools would be at his disposal. He also said that many of their books could be sold for a high price, and then the boy would never need money. He adds that some books would help the boy become stronger. Julius was delighted. He was glad that he was given the opportunity to use magical instruments and treatises. The man then told the boy to be careful, as he had heard that war would soon reach these parts. He told the boy that he would be safe as long as he stayed within the confines of the room. He reminded him that if he lost the mark, the door would close forever. The boy thought about the war. The man at this point says that it will be difficult. He asks if he can rely on the boy. The boy's eyes widen, and he says he will do everything right. He promises to protect this place until his master returns. The man grinned and patted the boy on the head, thanking him for his help. He says they will see each other again. Julius shouted that his master would definitely return, as he promised. That is why he protects this place, the master's room, and the entire country. And he is ready to do everything necessary for this. After all, he is sure that the master will return. Alma didn't attach much importance to that promise. He was convinced that Julius was Julius. He had taken him in on a whim, and he treasured that memory as something important. And, not wanting anyone to disgrace them, he had defended that place fiercely for 200 years. Alma was close to death when he met Julius. And he never met him more than once. His first life ended, and he also did not fulfill his promise. Alma tried to say something. Julius looked at the boy with alarm and saw that he was crying and apologizing to him. The man was shocked. Alma says that the man Julius wants to meet has been dead for a long time. He says that he died 200 years ago. The man says that it is all a lie. He does not believe Alma. Alma is still trying to convince the man that he should not act like the villains. Julius asked the boy to stop all this. Alma says that at the moment he is grateful to the goddess for his gift, because he was able to meet Julius again and correct the mistakes of the past. The man looks at the boy in surprise. He understands that Alma is really crying, but he still can't believe her. He thought about Alma's words about his master's death. Julius gets Alma's attention and picks up his mask from the ground. He says that if Alma wants to continue this whole farce, then Julius will play along. The man puts on a mask and says that he will use all his power and all his spells. Julius folds his hands and uses special spatial magic. He creates a world of ice prison. Alma looks at the man's capabilities in amazement. Julius sits on the ice throne and says that he now wants to test Alma. He explains that in the icy space, even life itself freezes. He wants to see how long Alma will stick to her point of view. Alma begins to freeze. His feet were covered in ice. Suddenly, Alma remembers that he did not show Julius the completed form of the ice prison. He is pleasantly surprised that Julius was able to reproduce the spell after looking at him only once. He is truly impressed by Julius's talent. The man asks what this means. Alma folds her hands and says that it is time to fulfill the promise. He is going to use a special spatial magic, the spell Vision, carved in ice. The spectators looked at the huge ice block that towered over the entire arena. Raul wondered what was going on. Strange sounds were coming from the block. Alma used the spell Vision, carved in ice. Julius looked around. He tried to understand what Alma did. He assumed that it was ice magic. Julius couldn't move. He felt like his whole body was frozen. He couldn't even use magic. His icy air no longer spread across the arena, and the ice fragments were frozen in their fall. Alma began to explain that all matter in the created world is permeated with particles called the element of time. Alma says that if you speed up the movement of these particles, then time will speed up for a person, and if you slow down the flow, time will start to go slower. He made the particles stop their movement, and time eventually stopped. Alma said that the magic that expanded the ice prison world's range of effect from frostbite to time was the vision carved in ice. Julius couldn't believe that such a thing was possible. Alma says that thanks to Julius's talent for ice magic, he was able to instinctively feel the foundations of the icy world. Julius understands that a non-real master would not be able to master magic to such perfection. Alma says he wanted to show Julius this spell 200 years ago. He apologized for making Julius wait. The man began to cry. He finally believed that Alma was the gentleman who had taken him in. The ice block is destroyed. The priest and all the spectators watch what is happening. Raul wondered who had won in the end. Julius was standing right in the center. Luna looked at the man with concern. She was thinking about Alma losing. But then she saw Julius fall to the ground, and Alma was standing in front of him at that moment. All the spectators were amazed. The priest announced that Alma was the winner. All the spectators screamed with delight. They wondered who Alma was. They could not believe that they had defeated the great sage. The priest announced that, according to the oath, the engagement with Luna was annulled. Alma did not expect this. He was happy. The people approached Julius. At this moment, the priest announced that Lord Eric, the ruler of Fandol, would be cleared of all charges. The boy heard Luna calling him. The girl ran up to the boy and hugged him. The boy smiled. The girl told him that she believed that he would succeed. Raul and Edward came up to them. Raul smiled, as always, with his hands behind his head, and Edward tried to hide his smile. Alma says that the audience was very excited. He did not want to stand out too much. Edward says that no one could have expected that Mr. Julius could be defeated. Edward adds that a duel is a rare thing. He says that the last time a bride was stolen was 140 years ago. Alma says that he understands everything. Then he thinks about Edward's words. The boy asks what the words about stealing the bride mean. Edward explains that the duel was originally held as an act of protest against the political marriage and an attempt to steal the bride. Legally, Alma's victory means that she and Luna are married. Luna and Alma are embarrassed. Raul opens his mouth in surprise. Raul asks Edward why they were told about this only now. The man says that he will take care of the preparations for the ceremony himself, so Luna and Alma don't have to worry. Raul didn't mean that. Luna was very embarrassed by what they were telling her about their wedding with Alma. The guy was also shocked that he would have to get married. After the battle in the arena, Alma and Julius returned to the office. Julius sat right in front of him and listened to him attentively. He asked where they left off and then smiled. Julius tells the story of what happened 200 years ago. He takes off his mask and says that 10 years after Alma left, on the outskirts of the capital, Julius had to fight a powerful magician called Demon. Alma looked at the man's face in shock. He guesses what happened. The man adjusts his hair so that his eye is visible. Alma sees that Julius's eye has been petrified. Julius suggested that excessive use of magic reduces the body's resistance. Julius explains that demons are humanoid monsters that understand speech. They live much longer than humans, and their bodies are stronger, but they are ruthless. Julius heard that the demons were at odds with the goddess since time immemorial and often fought with humans. The man tells that it is believed that in a great war that took place 200 years ago, a hero destroyed most of the demons, including their king. Julius met the demon. His body began to turn to stone. The demon turned around and said that he did not expect that during his short sleep the demons would be killed. He turned around and smiled and said that he would be interested in becoming the new king. Julius couldn't believe that he would lose. He remembered the promise Alma had made to him. That's why he gathered all his strength and decided that he would not lose. The guy raised his hand to attack the demon. The demon turned around and smiled predatorily again. The man said that it was an arrogant demon. Julius's sudden attack instantly struck him down. But Julius has had to cope with partial petrification. He says that at the moment his body is more rock than flesh. Julius put his mask back on and said that the fossilized cells were virtually impervious to aging. Although his hair had turned white, the rest of his body had not changed over the years. Alma finally understands why Julius was able to live for more than 200 years. But Julius didn't know when he would finally turn to stone. He says it could happen at any moment. Julius notices Alma's dejected look. The guy apologizes and says that all this happened because of his careless words. Julius tries to support Alma. He convinces him that he is not upset at all about the state of his body. He says that in some ways it is even convenient. The man says that his fingertips are icy, but on the other hand, he feels no pain when he bumps into people. He also shows that he can crack nuts with ease. Alma says that the man is an optimist. Julius reads that the greatest advantage is that he was able to meet Alma. The man smiles. Alma is also happy that they were able to meet. Julius says that his circumstances are not as severe as Alma's. He thought that reincarnation was just a term from books. He believes that the boy had a bitter experience, considering the beliefs of people. Alma says that it was not quite like that. In the New World, the belief in the goddess is deeply rooted. Many people believe that after death the soul goes to the abode of the goddess, where she erases all memories of life and with them sins, after which the soul is reborn. Alma thought about his gift, reincarnation, which knocked him out of this flow. 200 years ago, religious fanatics had a hard time accepting this. Julius asked what he should do. Alma looked at the man, not understanding what he was talking about. Julius asks what he should call the guy, the one from the past or the one from the present. The guy sighs and says that he doesn't mind Julius calling him like in the old days, but he still reminds that his current name is Alma. Julius says that he will call him whatever Alma wishes. He bows and swears that from now on, his life belongs to Alma. The boy drinks tea and says it's too much. Then he burns his tongue and says the tea is too hot. Julius becomes more serious. He calls Edward. The man enters the office and listens to the Prime Minister's order. Julius shouts for the court physician to be brought to the office immediately. Alma tries to calm Julius down. Edward asks if he should call a specific physician for Alma. Julius shouts for him to bring all possible physicians. Alma says he is overdoing it. After the duel, Luna and Raul plan to return to Fandol immediately, but Luna asked to postpone the trip. She had not read all the treatises that were in the library. Julius provided them with housing, so they decided to stay in the capital for now. Raul caught Alma's attention. He was pointing at a fountain. Alma wasn't too surprised, since they were everywhere. It was Raul's first time in a capital, so fountains were new to him. Alma, on the other hand, felt very nostalgic. Luna approaches the boy. She leans on his shoulder. Alma asks if the girl is okay. The girl apologizes and says she was just dizzy. The guy touched his forehead to Luna's. He checked her temperature and said it was low. Luna got embarrassed and ran away, screaming that she was fine. The guy didn't understand what had happened to her, but he didn't stop her. After the duel, things became awkward between him and Luna. He thought that the girl suspected him of being the Reincarnator. The girl was very embarrassed, as she constantly remembered the wedding with Alma. She felt very awkward. Alma asked if the girl had fallen ill by chance. Then he analyzed her symptoms and realized that it was not a disease, but rather a level increase. The girl did not know what that meant. Alma explained that level increase is when the body cannot cope with the increase of several levels in a short period of time, as a result of which symptoms such as headaches and fever may appear. The guy opened the systems and continued to talk about how this was a kind of growing pain. He noticed that Luna's level had risen to level 5. Alma recalls that Luna had been fighting some pretty strong opponents lately. As a result, she had accumulated a lot of experience points. The girl was happy that she had become stronger. Suddenly, Raul caught their attention. He asked to be told that he felt bad because he had become stronger. Luna asked why Raul was acting like that. Alma suggested that it was just jealousy. Alma remembered that his level was still 1. He thought about how to level up from the base level. 1% of the minimum experience was required. The higher the level, the more experience was required to increase it. In order to quickly gain points, one had to face strong and dangerous opponents. By the end of his life, Alma had hardly raised his level. He thinks that Fenrir and Julius were dangerous opponents, but he was able to defeat them easily enough. To him, they were low-level opponents. Usually, it took a lot of experience points to reach level. The boys' thoughts were interrupted by Luna and Raul. Raul asked what they should do with this level increase. Alma said that they just needed to regain their strength, eat well, and rest. Raul was happy. Raul shows a bag of gold coins and says that he recently made a lot of money. He remembers a man who was making bets. Luna asks if this is really the winnings from bets on duels. Luna, Raul, and Alma were looking for a place to eat, but they didn't find a single restaurant. Raul guesses that they weren't going to the most crowded places. The guy suddenly thought that this situation seemed very familiar to him. Alma also thought the street looked very familiar. He recalled coming to a restaurant further down the road 200 years ago. Raul couldn't believe that there would be a restaurant in such a place. Alma remembers that the restaurant served traditional home cooking, which was very tasty. He remembers the owner, who was always generous and served large portions. He definitely knew the restaurant. Alma suggests going to this restaurant. Raul says they can do it. They approach a dilapidated house with a sign saying they are open. Alma looks at this house uncertainly. He already doubts that he was in this place 200 years ago. Alma, Luna, and Raul enter a restaurant. There was no one in the restaurant. Raul asked if this was a normal place. Alma thought that over time the restaurant had become much worse. He remembered that when he had entered it before, there were a lot of people. A girl came to Alma, Luna, and Raul's table. She brought the dishes and apologized for the wait. The guy looked at Luna and Raul first before eating. Raul and Luna tried the dishes and were pleasantly surprised by their taste. Raul said that the dishes were simple, but still had a rich taste. Alma was glad that his friends liked the dishes. Luna also liked the taste of the dishes. Alma finally calmed down because he noticed that Luna felt better. He was very happy. Then the boy tried the dish and his eyes widened in surprise. He couldn't believe that after 200 years the same taste of the dishes had been preserved. He was pleased to realize that some things do not change. Raul agrees with Alma. He then turns his head and asks what the strange statue is behind Alma. Alma turns to look at the statue. He saw a statuette in the form of a cat. Raul said that the cat looked like scary monsters. Luna, on the contrary, thought the cat was cute. Alma thought the figurine looked familiar. The hostess who brought the dishes came up to them and said that the cat was a family heirloom. The guy listened attentively to the girl. The owner tells us that 200 years ago, the founder of this restaurant, her great-grandfather, received the cat as a gift from a traveling magician. Alma reflects on the fact that 200 years have passed. The girl continues and says that it was an amazing meeting. She told about how a magician fell right on the threshold of their restaurant. They asked him what happened, and he replied that he had become fascinated with magical treatises and had not eaten for a whole week. Raul and Luna were amazed, and Alma hung his head, ashamed. He understands that it happened 200 years ago, but he still felt ashamed. Raul says that it reminds him of the moon. The girl screamed that it was not so. The owner tells us that 200 years ago this restaurant was on the verge of bankruptcy. So before closing, her ancestor used the remaining ingredients and generously fed the magician. The magician was so impressed that he couldn't even believe that no one came to this restaurant. The dishes seemed very tasty to him. Alma remembered everything. The hostess tells that instead of money he paid with a cat statue, he said that it was a treasure from the depths of the dungeon. According to the magician, the cat statue was able to attract people. Raul asked if people had started coming. The owner told him that the restaurant had started to flourish. But then her eyes started to water, and she said that over time, fewer and fewer people were coming, to the point that they stopped making a profit. She assumed it was because of her cooking skills. Raul and Luna immediately became alarmed. Raul assumed that the problem was in the location of the restaurant. He tells them that they themselves accidentally stumbled upon their restaurant. The girl continues to cry. Luna tries to console the girl and says that her dishes were very tasty. Alma touched the cat statue and noticed that in 200 years it had used up almost all of its mana reserves. Therefore, the artifact began to work with the opposite effect. Raul says he can't believe that such a hermit mage could have a treasure from the dungeon lying around. He assumes that it is not an artifact, but an ordinary object. He thinks that the mage is a fraud who just wanted a free meal. Alma smirked when he heard Raul say that he was a liar. He apologized for what happened to the restaurant. The owner asks not to say such things about the magician. She wipes away her tears and says that even on his deathbed, her great-grandfather was sincerely grateful to this magician. It was thanks to him that the girl decided to become a cook. The mistress understands the head and looks more determined. She says that she will be eternally grateful to the magician no matter what. The guy looked at the girl in amazement. The hostess suddenly becomes animated and apologizes for crying in front of them. She promises that she will continue to hone her skills so that the master magician will not be ashamed of their dishes. Alma goes to the exit and says that in this case he, Raul, and Luna will not bother the hostess. He says that it is time for them to leave. Raul agrees and, together with Luna, begins to get ready. Alma stopped in front of the door, turned to the hostess and said that her dishes were very tasty. He was sure that no one would remain indifferent to the aroma of her dishes. The girl looked at Alma with embarrassment. Finally, the guy promised that they would visit her restaurant again. Raul puts his hands behind his head and says that the restaurant was very tasty after all. He wonders if the restaurant will be able to regain its popularity. Alma says that the guy does not have to worry about it. Suddenly, the guy heard passers-by start discussing the delicious smell coming from the restaurant. They were all going to go to that girl's restaurant. They wondered how long the restaurant had been there. They assumed that if it smelled good, it would taste great. Alma thought that the artifact only slightly attracted people's attention, and in order to maintain the interest of visitors, talent is required. That is why Alma left the mana stone near the statue, which would last for 1,000 years. Alma wanted to visit the restaurant again, only he planned to go there soon, not in 200 years. Luna heard the guy and didn't understand what he was talking about. Alma recalled the words of the owner that she would continue to hone her skills no matter what. Raul and Luna noticed that the boy had stopped. They returned and asked what had happened. Alma closes his eyes, smiles, and says that everything is fine. He wonders if Luna and Raul will accept him when they find out that he is the reincarnated one. He wonders if he should reveal his true identity. Luna asks what happened to the guy. Raul says that Alma doesn't seem like himself. He finds it strange. The guy becomes more serious. It seems strange to him that as soon as he realized that he was happy, he immediately began to fear losing this very happiness. He wondered if this was really the happiness he was looking for. Raul, Alma, and Luna approached the palace. Raul was dumbfounded. He remembered that Julius had told them that they could stay at the hotel, but the hotel was being renovated. Edward met the whole company and said that the construction work would be completed very soon. Until then, they had to wait. Edward relays Mr. Julius's words that they cannot allow Mr. Alma to live in such an untidy place. Alma smirked and said that the man was overdoing it again. Luna noticed that the building was bigger than her house, and Raul said that he even liked it. Luna, Raul, and Alma fall silent, and then they all start shouting that the building is no longer a hotel, but a whole mansion. Edward approached Mr. Julius and asked if he would go to Alma. He reminds him that the man came to tell a story. The man notices that Julius was tense and thinking about something. Edward turns around and says that it's no big deal. He's going to tell her about it later, when the time is right. Edward looks at the man carefully and waits for him to continue his speech. Julius turns and smiles. He says that he cannot stand in Alma's way. He no longer intends to be a villain. Moreover, he wanted to help his master in any way he could. Julius says that Mr. Alma's carefree days are something he is willing to fight for until death. He is very determined because he has finally met the man who sheltered him 200 years ago and showed him the basics of magic. Julius met with Alma in a restaurant. They discussed an important topic which concerned a strange illness. About a month had passed since Alma had decided to stay in the capital. He had decided that he still had unfinished business that needed to be resolved. Julius holds out a picture on a sheet of paper and says that there are several people who have lost the gifts they received from the goddess, and a strange pattern was found on each of their bodies. Alma took the pattern in his hands and looked at it carefully. The boy thought that this pattern could mean lost. He thought about the people who suffered from this disease and lost their gifts. Alma heard that this strange disease was spreading not only in the kingdom but also in other continental countries. Alma remembers that he has seen a similar pattern somewhere. It seems very familiar to him. The guy thinks about it. Alma suggests that the disease may be caused by a curse. He says that he is not leaving the capital anytime soon anyway, so he can investigate the matter. Julius says that he would be grateful. Julius becomes more serious and asks Alma not to act recklessly. Alma gets up and leaves. He says that Julius does not need to worry, as losing his gift is harmless to him since he has already been reborn. Julius says that it is not just the gift. He suspects that someone is spreading the disease. Alma looks at the man in surprise. At this time, on one of the hills, there stood a dark-haired girl who watched the city and listened to the whistling of the wind. Alma began to look more closely at the pattern depicted on the sheet, wondering what kind of disease was this that was affecting the entire capital. He was going to conduct a large-scale study to find out what this lost was.